destruction and poaching. Every part of the tiger, from its whiskers to its tail, are sold in the markets today. And we sometimes fail to realize that this predator, this very charismatic predator, is a unique animal which also plays a pivotal role in the health and diversity of our ecosystem. So today, St. Joseph's, the National Science Association of St. Joseph's College, in collaboration with A Rocha India, have come together with three prominent speakers in the field of tiger conservation to impart the awareness that if our tigers go extinct, our entire system would collapse. It's not just about saving a beautiful animal, but it is also about saving thousands of other species, including us, that are dependent on their existence. Yep. Yes. So I will hand it over to the next speaker.
A very good evening to all the participants of our webinar for today. It's indeed a great pleasure. It's indeed a great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the webinar, Mr. Harsha Narasimhamurthy. He is here to give us insights about photographing stripes. And about Harsha Narasimhamurthy, he is a commerce graduate by qualification and a wildlife photographer by profession. His passion for nature and wildlife has drove him towards working for few NGOs during the initial phase of his career. He now works for India's premier travel and photography company called Toehold. He has trained over 1,000 people in photography till date and is popularly known as Catman by his clients for his acute sense in tracking the big cats. He won the Youth of Bangalore 2014 award by Government of Karnataka. He was also announced as one of India's top 8 young wildlife photographer by Seaves Wildlife magazine in 2014 and was also interviewed on All India Radio in the year 2015 and 2019. He has won the prestigious award Akshari Award in 2016 and a special award at Youth Photography Salon. He is also the winner of Youth Excellence Award in the year 2019. It's again a great pleasure to have you, sir. Over to you.
Hi, a very good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy to be here and talking amongst you people. A great honor indeed. Thank you for the St. Joseph's College and all the people associated to it. It's been indeed a great pleasure for me to talk on what can be a better day than this. It's the International Tiger Day. So I firstly wish you all a very, very happy International Tiger Day. So on this day, let's take a pledge that we work hard towards the conservation of wildlife and nature. So what I'll be talking today about is the blend of my style of saving wildlife. It could be, I consider photography as one of the powerful tool to save wildlife, because with photography, I tend to go and explore and give awareness to people. There have been a lot of incidents where I consider my photography skill as one of the topmost conservation tool for myself. Conservation can be done in a lot of ways. So for me, wildlife photography is one of them. So I'll run you through a lot of slides today. So I'll take you through my journey of photography. I'll tell you how I fell in love with tigers, how tigers took the prime place in my love for animals. So as a kid, I grew up listening to a lot of mythological stories from my grandma and my grandpa, where you had a lot of animals involved there. So maybe that was the first ever interest which sparked interest in me for nature and wildlife. So as I started growing up, I started getting hooked to this comic called as Jungle Book. So when everyone wanted to watch Mowgli as their hero, I always adored Shere Khan. So maybe that was my initial love for tigers. So as I started growing, as I got into my school, college, maybe I forgot what was my passion, and I got too busy with my studies maybe. So when I was doing my bachelor's, there was this NGO called as I think they came and showed a movie called as Truth About Tigers. NGO called Watchers India Trust came and showed a movie about truth about tigers, which kind of re-sparked the interest in me for wildlife. So those were the days where the Save the Tiger campaign was rampant. Thanks to some conservation today, a lot of conservationists, thanks to them, we have seen a steady increase of tiger population in the last few years. But even now, the numbers are alarming.
Okay, Martha, I'll just write that down.
With what we are saying. Guys, if you don't mind, can you please mute your audios? Thank you. Yeah. So my passion for tigers grew as I started exploring in this field. So my initial stages, I started working for an NGO called Watchers India Trust, where I used to go and help them monitor the tiger habitats and tiger prey, a lot of other things. Then I did a lot of cleanliness drives around the forest boundaries and the forest national parks. So then around 2015, I decided though this is where my passion lies, photography. So though photography though photography is a very beautiful thing, I still love to show the ugly side of wildlife also, because that is what is the need of our, and I would highly think photography is one of the powerful tool. So I'll start my presentation. I would be happy to answer your questions at the end. So I'll run you through a lot of pictures of what I have shot till date and how my the journey of tiger photography started.
Humble request to all the participants, please mute your mic.
Is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Proceed.
awesome. Okay, so welcome guys. Once again, welcome to Photographing Stripes. Okay, so what initially drew me to the forest? So maybe around 2012 or 2011 was my first visit to Bandipur. So a place which is very close to Bangalore, and that was my first ever park. So when I went to Bandipur, the first ever trip, maybe in 2010, I never saw a tiger. So, but when people started talking about tigers, that kind of gave me a question: why are these animals so special? Why is this particular species so special? Why are people stressing on saving tigers so much? So that is when I realized, oh, this magnificent creature is something beautiful. It's like a spiritual creature, a beautiful animal which holds the lot of benefits when it's saved. It's like the apex predator in the food chain, and it's one of the major, I would say, the key players in nature conservation. I would say that major player in nature conservation. So I have extensively traveled across India in terms of shooting and exploring wildlife. So a lot of places, like I've been to Sundarbans, I've worked in the Nilgiri landscapes, I've worked in the Western Ghats, I've been to the Central India, the Aravallis. I've worked in almost most of the tiger reserves in India. So what started off for my journey initially was, so when I went and saw my tiger, it used to be something like this. Tigers, trust me, it's not so easy to find. So people think just because I show them tigers, they think it's too easy. Like you people know, like we just heard what Mukta said, 3,900 tigers in the whole of India. Can you just imagine, to the population of humans? So seeing a tiger is very, very tough. So my initial tiger sightings was like this. This was shot by one of my friends. So when we were on a recent safari, so the tiger was camouflaged like this, sitting inside the grass. Then something came like this. So I could now slightly progress to a better level, I would say. When I saw a lot of stripes in between the greens, I would say I came across a little better sighting than that. Then a sighting like this happened. So I was very happy then. At least seeing this, I became very happy. Seeing this, oh, something, at least I have seen that. Then as gradually time passed, sighting like these came for me. So this was one of the sightings in Bandhavgarh in the summer. So this gives you a clear picture of how easily one can miss seeing a tiger. Though the tiger is present there, and you might most of the times not even realize that you have been watching, you're being watched, because of their coat, the beautiful coat they have. They are very camouflaged. They're so well camouflaged that you tend to miss them a lot of times. Then I came across this huge male. So this was a very interesting sighting we had. So we saw a courting pair of tigers. Tiger is called as Kajiri and a tiger called as Banbehi male. So these are named by their territories in Bandhavgarh. So they both were courting, and they're on one of the hills. So this afternoon we heard a loud roar. Hello. And we got to start.
I'm sorry for disturbing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for disturbing. The slides are not moving. I don't know if it is the other end or it is me, but can you please look at it?
Guys, can anyone confirm if the slides aren't moving? Sorry?
It's not moving even for me. I'm also facing the same thing.
Yeah, now it has changed.
Sorry, it
Now
is
it has
due to
changed.
a lag. Maybe.
Can can
Yeah.
can any of the organizers let me know if it's moving?
Yes, sir. We'll let you know.
Sure. But is it moving properly now?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Could you see different pictures? Okay, thank you. Okay, so guys, this sighting was from Bandhavgarh, where this male tiger, who is known to be very elusive. So usually tigers are very secretive and very elusive. They really don't like human presence. Trust me, they are very shy. So there's this common notion in us. Maybe it's because we have learnt it that way from our childhood, where our forefathers used to scare us, telling, if you don't eat your food, the tiger will come and pick you up. So it used to be a bad notion where people used to think tigers are a threat. Even in fact, when I see Jungle Book, I still wonder why it's been shown as a very bad threat. But trust me, tigers are very elusive, and they want to be avoided by. They want to avoid humans as much as possible. So they tend to go and sneak into the bushes, or just crouch and sleep there without getting noticed when we are on the safari. So seeing a tiger is very tough in the forest. It's like most of the times this sighting was like a fraction of a second. We saw this guy and he ran across. So this was a very interesting behavior, because this male came and tried to chase away the younger male. So since he was a very shy guy, he was maybe the first or the second time caught on a camera. This was the first or the second time caught on a camera. See how fast he is drifting across. So finally, I got a very good, decent picture of a tiger, where I could say I've seen a proper tiger. So this one was from Ranthambore. So when I was photographing this animal, again, this was a beautiful evening on one of the hot summers, 47 degrees. It was pretty hot that day. And after waiting for 4 hours, this guy came out and stood like this on the rock. A mating pair, a courting pair again. So usually tigers have a gestation period. The tigress has a gestation period of around 3 months, where they give birth to younger litters. So they, since during the mating season, they are generally staying together for maybe around 4 to 5 days. So this was one instance from Ranthambore, where you can see the male and the female. So the male is trying to woo his partner, and she's just resting on the track. So tigers are can mate around some 20 to 30 times a day in short bursts, 20 to 30 times a day. And after 3.5 months, the female gives birth to very young ones, the cubs. And after 2 months, or close to 2.5 months, she brings them out and takes around her territory. So again, a courting pair. This was just after the mating ritual. It was a play fight. It was not an actual fight. It was just a play fight. Female snarls in displeasure at the male. So once they have cubs, tigers tend to hunt. So this again gives us a very important thing: the conservation of prey species, because it's like a complete food chain, the circle of life. Because if they don't have enough things to eat, they can't survive, and the younger ones can't survive. Especially when the tiger has cubs, she has to kill often. She makes multiple kills. Maybe in a week she kills 3 or 4 times, based on what she is going to kill. A rough estimate says a tiger has to kill around 90 to 100 ungulates. I mean, this deer species, for it to survive in every year. So this was one of the scenarios where in Kabini, in close to Bangalore. So we got this beautiful female tigress go and grab this chital fawn, and you can see just the cub, her son, behind her running back. Another classic example for a tiger, the prey conservation. Prey is utmost important, because of late we have seen a lot of forest where you see the prey population to be very less. The animals have started straying to the boundaries. So when they stray to the boundaries, that is where the human animal conflict starts. Because once they come to the boundaries, they try to go and pick up livestock from the villages. So in retaliation, definitely people will try to chase it away, or scare it away, or try to poison the carcass of whatever it has killed. There have been a lot of instances where tigers have been poisoned to death, unfortunately. So that is the reason even the conservation of prey is equally important if you have to support the conservation of tiger. A young cub, a very young cub, he just darts away, she just darts away. On the other side, her mother and her sister were waiting, and she just ran across to join them. A beautiful young male. So as I'm talking about this, couple of days back, he just passed away. Very unfortunate incident. Again, they say it could be poisoning. Some say it could be a human-animal conflict, something. No one is clear about it. So though we have been working on tiger conservation so much, still somewhere we are lagging to match up to what we are trying to do. So I hope we understand the importance of our animal here. A beautiful tiger, like I said, tigers play a very strong role in the conservation of water also, because with a lot of forest there's a lot of water, fresh water, there's a lot of fresh water. So it's very important for you to realize saving the tiger means saving a lot of other things. If you save a tiger, that means it's more of saving your whole nature. When tigers rule that particular place, that means they have abundant of forest. A lot of forest areas means a lot of water. So that is what is most important now. A play fight with two siblings, one of the scenarios where the play fight happened here. A young tiger. So tigers are very territorial. Tigers are very territorial. The reason why I want to stress this out is, today what we are facing is the major threat to wildlife. What, according to me, what I personally believe is, more than poaching, is the habitat loss. Day by day the forest areas are shrinking. So like this, if you see this tiger is trying to mark his territory by clawing this tree. That means every male tiger has a territory of around 70 to 25 square kilometers for himself, and in his territory there will be around three females. That is, around each female will hold a territory of 20 to 25 square kilometers per tiger. So what happens when other tigers barge into their territory is just like humans. When someone else comes into your house, you retaliate. So that's the same way, and they can fight to death. They can fight to death. So a lot of times, a lot of incidents have happened where tigers have fought in themselves and killed each other, and that also is a loss for us, because it's a loss of one precious life. So that's the reason the need of the hour is the growing forest, getting the forest, making sure our corridors are not disconnected from whatever they are existing, at least now. Because day by day we are seeing a lot of encroachment happening in names of development and all. It's pretty important for development to happen, but definitely not at the sake of wildlife or the nature. So this is how they are very keen. They go, and here you can see a tiger going and smelling these leaves where it's trying to get its territory. So basically, if any other tiger has come and sprayed on it. So the unique behavior of tigers is they go and spray mark with urine. So they mark their areas with urine. So every tree or every bush or every rock they go around, they go and mark it. So that in turn tells the other tiger, keep away from me. This is not your place. This is my place, and keep away from me. Okay, a very interesting sighting which had last year, in fact, last October, and what could be a better day than to share this? So seen here are two male tigers. Seen here are two male tigers. One is called as the T57, tiger number 57, and the other one called as tiger number 58. So on a hot winter morning, so it was a very hot winter morning. So that particular day we came and parked our car in Ranthambore, and all of a sudden we see one male tiger trying to stalk something. And then we realized it was a mating pair which was sleeping in the bushes, and this guy was slowly crouching towards them. So as time passed, we got to witness one of the most great, I would say one of the greatest natural history moments. Maybe I would never see this in my lifetime again. A battle of two tigers, a huge battle of two tigers. They went up fully spranging and they hit each other. They started clawing each other. They bit each other into it. And this is how it started. Finally, one guy had to surrender. And the interesting thing was, these two were brothers who had split long back. Maybe 8 years ago, they had moved away from their mom. So how tigers behave is, maybe once they reach an age of 2 years or 2 years, 2.5 years, they start moving away from their mother and then forming their own areas. So maybe after 8 years, they have met and they had a terrible fight. And finally, one of the guy pinned down, and they went on their ways. So the major reason what I could think of this fight was, especially in a place like Ranthambore, which is quite large for that fact, tigers have no area to go, especially males. Male tigers need larger areas. So when they don't have larger areas, that means there is a lot of infighting happening. Because if you see this classic example, Ranthambore is a massive park. It's a huge forest. It's a huge tiger reserve. Unfortunately, what happens is, due to the loss of habitat, tigers are forced to have boundaries which are going across each other's territory. It's like overlapping. Each other's territories are overlapping today. So when they come in conflict, it can be deadly. It can be brutal. The battles can be very, very brutal. So a classic example for human-animal conflict. So this picture was from the Kabini backwaters way back in 2016. So when I shot this, I was pretty shocked because right inside the forest, you see people fishing, and the other side, the elephants are having water. So when I saw this scene, it was very, very bad because it's a protected area and someone is coming and looting the wealth of the water. So there are a lot of marine species which have to rely on these fishes to survive. So this is what we are facing today. A lot of intervention of humans in nature that in turn is taking them like robbing them of their own basic necessities. So this is one classic example for a human animal conflict. So this male tiger, you can see a collar around his neck. Another very bad example for a human animal conflict. Again, due to a shrinking space, he was struggling to find his own territory. So that is when he was being pushed away to the village borders by other dominant males. And when this guy started going to the village borders, he initially started picking up cows and sheep. But as he started getting bolder, he realized humans are a better prey, and he started preying upon humans, and he was branded as a man-eater. So they caught him, they relocated him back to the jungle, but again he went and started killing people outside the park. So that is when he was now taken and put into the jail. It's like he's in the prison. So in the prison, in the zoo, basically a zoo for an animal is a prison. So that is where he is today. So if you can realize, you have a collar, he has a collar around his neck. So this is something called as a radio collar, which they used to track and map the animals. So this guy was a very, very sad example for a human animal conflict. If he had better areas, maybe he would have ventured and lived his life of his own. So the need of the hour, having large landscapes for tigers, having large landscapes for wildlife, because only with increasing forest areas they can survive. Trust me, because they need a lot of area to survive. The need of the hour is to make sure and tell people that we need forests. We need to conserve forest. Tourism, I consider a lovely tool in terms of conservation protection. Though tourism has the ugly side of wildlife tourism, I would still say wildlife tourism is one of a boon for tigers. Say example, I will tell you an example. So say as a normal tourist, a frequenter to a forest, I go to places like Kabini, Ranthambore very often. So when I don't see a tiger for months together, say I haven't seen a tiger for 2 months straight, in spite of spending so much of time or knowing that she hasn't been seen, we raise a concern. There's a indication where people are still knowing. People have to be the park officials or the government or the people who are involved into it have to answer someone. So in a way, when there is no sighting of this particular tiger or a tigress, you tend to ask questions. And social media is one of the powerful tool if it's used properly. What can be better than social media to spread awareness about nature and wildlife? So as wildlife tourism, like I said, it's very, very important because it also generates a lot of revenue for the forest. I hear a lot of people tell that tourism disturbs animals, tourism disturbs that. Yes, it does, but if it's in a wrong way, if it's followed in a very ethical way, trust me, tourism is the biggest boon for animal conservation. That's my personal opinion, and I would strongly say that tourism is one of the biggest boons for wildlife conservation because it generates a lot of revenue. There's a lot of there's no discrepancy when people start questioning you there, because as someone like me who goes into the forest, I can take pictures of the forest if there's something bad happening and post it and bring it to the notice of people. So tourism is one of the major support for wildlife conservation. Patrolling staff, the forest department, I would say a big hats off to these people. Without them, today the animals wouldn't have survived. So this is a picture where it's one of the vehicles of a forest department patrolling staff. So this young tiger is very curious and he's trying to come and see what kind of species is this. With tiger conservation, guys, saving tigers means saving forests. Saving forests means we save a lot of other species. So let's save India's jungle book. We have the melanastic leopards in India. We have the leopards in India. We have the Indian wild dogs. we have the Asiatic elephants, the Indian gaur, the spotted deer. So these all form India's best jungle book, and we are very, very fortunate to have all of these. So let's pledge and let's hope that we don't lose them ever. So let's pledge and let's hope we'll never ever lose them. So saving forests means saving tigers. Saving tigers means it's like a circle. It's like a circle. One thing you save, a lot of things are being saved. So as a common layman, what's the best we can do is spreading awareness of how important the need of habitats are, how important the conservation of habitats are for your wildlife to survive. I hope you enjoyed this. I would be happy to take your questions and answer them now. And I would really thank all of you for providing me this wonderful opportunity. On to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think Anukriti. This session will be moderated by Sumishal. If Sumishal is there, she will take questions, if any. Or the participants can unmute and ask your questions. Thank you. The questions can be also about Mr. Harsha's experience in this field and his vivid field experiences that he has gone through. So if students and others who are part of this session have anything to ask in that regard, can ask.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon.
Sir, after how many safaris did you spot the first tiger?
Maybe around 40 safaris. Close to 40 safaris, yeah.
Which all cameras do you use, sir?
I use a wide range of cameras. So I have currently a Nikon D850. I am a Nikon user, so I use a wide range of equipment in Nikon.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, sir.
Hi.
Can you please tell me, have you spotted any poachers and have you tried to, stop them?
Okay, we haven't directly found poachers, like not a direct sighting of poachers, but there were instances where a few poachers were caught on the camera traps. So whenever we had put camera traps, we had found them and we handed it over to the wildlife cell. So, and I think they were also punished.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi. So I just wanted to know, at what range did you have to be in order to take a picture of any tiger or any wildlife for that matter?
This is a very good question. So I would say maintaining a safe distance is very, very important. So it could be important for you and it could be important for the animal also, because the animal doesn't get stressed out by your presence, and when it's not stressed out, it will ensure that it will be very calm, and you are also at the benefit because hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you are also on a benefit that you can still shoot peacefully. So there are some tigers which have grown up seeing vehicles. As a safari on a tourism aspect, there are some tigers which have grown up seeing vehicles right from their younger age. It could be because they have been, like if you see the central Indian tigers like Ranthambore and all, animals are quite bolder there compared to our southern Indian tigers. Because here, the minute they see the vehicle, they tend to run away because they haven't seen or exposed to a lot of vehicles. But when in central India, they see around 20 gypsies in a day, so they can easily get comfortable. So it depends on how well you place your vehicle and how safe you make the tiger feel. So there are times where I have had tiger sightings just next to my vehicle. They walked past, brushed their walk past a car. There have been sightings where I feel it's on the moon so far. So it depends. It's very subjective.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, sir.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Shivkumar from Department of Zoology itself.
Okay.
Very nice to meet you actually today. I was more interested in photography to check out the photos of your tigers, but I could join a little late. Anyway, nice meeting you, sir. I just wanted to ask one question. Today's Times of India states that Karnataka has lost some tiger population, and Madhya Pradesh have
gained it back.
actually
Yes.
overcrossed. What do you think? What's the reason? Is it because of the poachers or the loss of landscape?
It could be, I would say majorly it's due to the loss of landscape, because today what's happening is more than poaching. Thankfully, touch wood, there have been a lot of teams which are striving hard to avoid poaching. There have been a lot of squads set up in Karnataka or in different states. In Karnataka, we have a special tiger protection force, STPF. So they work in day and out. So, but the thing, if you see on the rise, is a lot of the inside conflicts of tigers. There are a lot of tigers which are dying due to the inbound conflicts. Then some of them could be due to electrocution in the village borders. So that is definitely the loss of habitat. I would say that is 100% loss of habitat. That's the major threat what I feel today is.
No, I'll ask you sometime afterwards, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Hi, sir.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is regards to how, so you are in support of ecotourism, which
Yes.
I'm actually from Maharashtra. So I have been to Tadoba recently, and I've
Yes.
seen that it's very difficult to kind of monitor ecotourism in terms of photographers. So what do you think the photographers, how ethical is it, and how do you think it could be regulated better?
See, it's like two faces of the same coin. So one, like I said, it's very, very important. It's been one of the powerful tool. At the same time, I have seen a lot of people going unethical. So it's one should understand their own ethics. There's a very thin line between being a good photographer and a non-ethical photographer. So people should themselves understand that. Like the scene you said, Tadoba, I personally go there and I do photography tours, and I know it's like a circus at times. It's literally like a circus where the tiger is surrounded by 20 vehicles. But at the same time, though it's a very bad sign, I still think there is some kind of positiveness also from it. Though I'm definitely not supporting the harassment of animals there. If people maintain a safe distance from the animal, it's more than enough. Even if there are 20 vehicles and if they follow the ethical guidelines, it's definitely very good. If you see a park like Kanha, which is very, very ethical, they have very strong rules.
Yeah.
They can't go very close to the tiger, and if there are 20 vehicles, each of them should be parked very, very far. So that's one beauty. So it's all about people understanding it themselves.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, please tell me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big enthusiast. I'm a big animal behaviorist. Very much interested.
Okay.
4 years ago, I had been to Bandipur National.
Okay.
The reserve.
Okay.
And in Gypsy, I was introduced to a tiger which was just maybe some 7 feet from me.
Okay.
It was just chilling over there.
Okay.
They said it was the Prince of Bandipur.
Ah, okay, okay.
And it didn't had a paw.
It didn't have a paw.
And when I, yeah,
Okay.
the driver said the same thing.
Okay.
I asked him why, and he said like it is the work of the poachers. Something he said that, and he closed it off. What I wanted to ask is the famous Prince of Bandipur lost his paw, and isn't our government or the officials that active that they couldn't save the major part, which is like a gem of Bandipur? What they said to me. I mean, this is my question. I couldn't frame it better, so yeah,
no
thank
issues,
you.
no issues. Okay, so first and foremost thing, I don't think so. It had lost its paw. Maybe it was just a different story. The driver might have cooked it up, because when he, I don't know when you saw it. 4 years back, he was still alive. So the time he died of his old age. The prince died of his old age in 2017, I guess. But when he was dead, people who were walking in the forest, he was not killed by a poacher for sure. He died of his old age, but people still, some poachers who had come into the forest for some other meat hunt, so like a spotted deer or something, they had chopped his face, and they had basically chopped his snout, and they had taken off his nails, and they were later found and they were caught. They were tried in the court. But at the same time, the government unfortunately is trying to do things which are trying to protect that, but I would still say it's not at sufficient. We need even more stronger rules for things happening here.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please tell me.
Sir, I want to know that what is your main source of earning, and how do you sponsor your all those expensive safaris and
Okay.
equipments?
Okay. For me, I am a teacher. So I basically teach photography. So that is one form of earning for me. If I'm just a photographer, trust me, as a wildlife photographer in India or anywhere, as a career, it's very tough. Because I teach, I earn, and I am able to survive. So you can, you can see my Instagram page. It's called as Harsha Narsimurthy. You can find me on Instagram, so you can see what I do there. Yes, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Participants, like Mr. Harsha said about his Insta page, you can write to him and share your thoughts. Because this we are scheduled into 30 minutes talk and the question answer session for 10 minutes. Also, Mr. Harsha has another appointment to go. Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir. Now it's over to Sumant.
Thank you, sir. So my name is Sumant, and on behalf of the Natural Science Association, Department of Zoology, I would like to thank you for sharing your experiences of photographing tigers and also giving us an insight into the behavioral aspects of tigers and also human-animal conflicts and conservation measures. And of course, your photographs are amazing. I'm sure the participants enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sumant.
Yeah, over to Anukriti.
I request all the participants from YouTube to join on Microsoft Teams, and also everyone who is not written their names in your Microsoft Teams account, please write your name. I now introduce
I believe there is some connectivity issue. We have the next speaker, Mr. Avinash. Mr. Avinash will be introduced by Maria. And yes, Maria.
Can I just introduce myself?
We are allowing student volunteers to grow. That's one of the component of Natural Science Association. As you see, it's all run by students. So you were also part of Natural Science Association when you were a student. Yeah, over to Maria.
So, good afternoon, sir. I'm Ajay Maheshwari. I am honored to introduce the second speaker for today, Mr. Avinash Krishnan, who is a large mammal ecologist studying Asian elephants in the Panagata National Park, Bangalore. He undertook his master's in wildlife management and conservation at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. Avinash has over a decade of experience in the field of ecology and wildlife conservation. As an avid writer and a speaker, he has published many research articles and technical reports in popular journals and lectured in conservation forums related to his field of expertise. He has trained numerous students and forest frontline staff on scientific methodologies, human-wildlife conflict management, captive elephant welfare, and anti-poaching efforts in the state of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. He currently works in the capacity of research officer at A Rocha India, a unit of an international environment non-profit based in 23 countries. Today, Sir is here with us to deliver the topic on Lone Star of Deccan, a prelude to conserving tigers in a fragile ecosystem. It's a great pleasure to have you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Very kind of you to give me that introduction. Can you guys hear me as well as see this, the screen with the slide on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've been told by Dr. Jaishankar to wrap this up in 30 minutes, and firstly, it's indeed a pleasure to talk to all of y'all and have this collaboration with A Rocha India and St. Joseph's College. Like my introduction says that I've done more work on elephants than on tigers. So with all due respect, I'd like to place that in the beginning itself. So the talk is basically going to give you a fair insight, rather in the sense of a prelude to tiger conservation in fragile ecosystems. And having said that, Banarghata, the landscape where I've been working, also has presence of tigers. So I'm just going to try and link the whole idea of tiger conservation in this country, as well as some key insights of tiger research that has happened in this landscape that we had monitored as part of our programs. Just to set the stage, I think the speaker before me has probably given you a fair understanding of tiger conservation in general, talking about threats and the challenges in securing the species. But I'd like to just touch upon some of the basic facts that I think most of it is available on the internet, and if you read some reports, you'll get most of what I said. I think you're aware that the tiger is the largest of all cats, and it's purely a Southeast Asian species, and also for having had this animal as our national animal in India, as well as many other Southeast Asian countries where the tiger is found, they also consider it to be their national animal as well. So we are roughly looking at around 3,000 tigers, of which 7% of its earlier historical range is being currently occupied by these 3,000 individuals, and which sadly means that we've lost a lot of area that tigers used to be there, extending right from the lower half of the Indian subcontinent to Far East Russia, in the Siberian mountains. But in India, like I said, like if you can see on the text, there are about 60% of the tigers that occupy the range states, the range countries, are in India. So India is a global entity when it comes to tiger numbers. From a protection perspective, we have roughly about 40 tiger reserves which harbor these tigers. When I say harbor these tigers, I mean there are large metapopulations within the Indian forests, and these tiger reserves or protected areas or conservation reserves act as source population for tigers, which means they're equivalent to the breeding population, which is very important for the long-term future of the species. So back in 2003, just as the Project Tiger initiated its landscape level enumeration program to talk about assessing tiger populations, there was a autonomous body called the Tiger Task Force, which was set up by the second meeting of the National Board of Wildlife sometime in March. So they have a 12-point agenda looking at various aspects about tiger conservation. The reason why I mention this is today tiger conservation in India is considered to be one of the foremost concerns, as well as the foremost mandates in protecting this species, especially the tiger, for having been a keystone and a global charismatic. So India today looks at tigers from a very different perspective, right from the initial days of the Raj, where tigers were decimated for various purposes, until the modern day tiger, where a lot of conservation and protection measures are taken to secure the future of the Bengal tiger in various parts of the country. Now, the tiger, something that most of my work, especially not just with the tiger, but generally with other wildlife that I worked is a theory beyond forests. Now, tigers generally, if you understand as a species, are highly behaviorally plastic animals. They can live in habitats across. I remember Dr. John Singh saying that his first tiger sighting was at around an altitude around 14,000 feet somewhere in Tibet. So if you could look at the range in which the altitudinal range in which tigers occupy habitats is enormous. Now, if you look at the map on the right, that's roughly 13 range countries in Southeast Asia, and you can see the range and where tigers are actually found. So they're spread across 13 range countries. And in these 13 range countries, the forest matrix is completely different. Like the landscape that I work is typical a dry thorn forest. And if you go up the Malaysian peninsula, they're typical evergreen forests. So tigers in some sense are essentially occupying multiple use forests. And these forests are not just for tigers, but there are a lot of people, there are a lot of other wildlife, and a lot of different landscape mosaic that you can see. So tiger, being an iconic species, also is very, very adaptive. Now, interestingly, if you look at India, and the map is very self-explanatory there, where tigers are occupying currently, most of these areas are not typical protected areas. So, I mean, of course, the previous speaker spoke about a lot of these fantastic images of tigers. I mean, all of them were taken in protected areas where protection is very high for these animals. But tigers today, if you can look at it, that 1 out of every 3 tiger could be possibly occupying areas that are not inside forests anymore, or probably looking at secondary forest habitats that are probably linking large tiger populations. So tigers today have been dispersed into areas, and this is also part to do with some of the conservation threats the species has, as well as the fact that tigers inherently have a lot of dispersing nature. Like today, conflict in most of the areas are largely because of the dispersing trends in most of tiger individuals. But if that is a trend that is being observed. But having also said that, there are very good metapopulation for tigers in the country, especially the Western Ghats. Seems to harbor one of the best tiger populations in the country, along with elephants. So these metapopulations are crucial from a conservation perspective. Now, what is important for saving tigers or conserving tigers? We constantly use these two terms very rampantly, but what is very important to look at is not just look at the tiger alone as a species, but also to look at what feeds to the tiger. The prey density is very important. Many areas, I mean, if you've read the 2018 tiger census, tiger population enumeration report, a lot of areas that had tigers before don't have tigers anymore. Now, this could not be attributed necessarily to poaching or habitat destruction and things like that, but many of these areas have lost its prey. So when prey goes, the tiger goes. And similarly, biological corridors. Now, this is a very interesting area because a lot of our Indian forests, especially, are highly fragmented. Like if you look at the tiger population, or rather the tiger metapopulation in this country, they're not very contiguous. So you have the central Indian population, you have the western population, you have the northeastern population, and the northwestern population. All these populations are genetically isolated. There's no way that animals from the south could go to the north or to the center. But within these metapopulations, there are again disturbed forests or broken forests where tigers are again locked into small habitats, and sometimes linking these habitats are very important. So therefore, the role of biological corridors become very important to secure the gene flow, as also to secure the distribution, the dispersing trends in tigers. And of course, I think most of you all are aware that poaching concern, which is still rampant. A lot of us think that poaching has come down, and there's still challenges. I was also part of the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau many years ago. We still have cases where tigers are poached and being sent to different parts of China, along Nepal, in the Tibetan border. So protection for tigers is very, very important. And as long as you can give protection to the species, tiger numbers can always come back. Tigers are extremely adaptive animals. If you can give them prey and protection, they will always come back. Now, so I just quickly wanted to share a small little rapid action survey that we did way back in 2015. This was a project that was commissioned to us by the Forest Department in Bannerghatta. And I'd like to call this the Lone Star of the Bannerghatta National Park, because I mean, if you know Bannerghatta and if you probably visited, I'm not talking about the zoo, I'm talking about a protected area of roughly about 260 square kilometers of forest. A tiger was reported in 2015 for the first time. When I say first time, it was first time photographly documented, although there's been anecdotal evidence from 2007, 2009. My organization has been monitoring these evidences since 2007. And also, if you're interested in natural history, then there was always reports of tigers in the early 50s, early 70s by a very famous hunter turned conservationist called Kenneth Anderson. In his books, he talks about killing tigers as far as in a place called Jaulagiri, which is about 60 kilometers from where I am, from Bannerghatta. And tigers have known to occupy the Bannerghatta forest, which is typically the Eastern Ghat landscape, for many, many years. But over the years, we've realized that the tiger has probably vanished, or it was never reported prolifically in the area. But we thought the tiger, we to some extent, we realized that the tiger was not a species that inhabits the Bannerghatta forest or anywhere in the northeastern Ghat, northern Eastern Ghat landscape in the state of Karnataka. So back in 2015, I remember we were told that there could be possibly a large carnivore, and we ended up collecting basic baseline information such as making these tiger pug mark casts, and also collecting some scat samples to ascertain whether it's actually a tiger or probably another carnivore, which could be a leopard. So Bannerghatta National Park as a forest, I'd like not to get too much into the details of the area and things like that. The map again on the left is very self-explanatory. It's south of Bangalore, 22 kilometers. Has not reported a resident population of tigers. When tigers, of course, I mean, tigers need to live in a certain area for a certain period of time for it to be establishing a territory and continue the discourse of it being a tiger. But never in archival history or anything that favors this concept where tigers have regularly used the areas. So there was a huge gap between the last 10, 15, 20 years and then the early 50s. The early 50s of data from Kenneth Anderson's writing talks about sporadic presence of tigers here and there, and that too from a conflict perspective. So we were never sure, or even till now, we never sure that whether these landscapes potentially harbored tigers. But what was interesting is that tiger presence was only observed like connected forests, like Bannerghatta National Park, which is located on the northernmost tip of the Eastern Ghats, is also contiguous to other protected areas in the south, which are considered to be potential tiger habitats. Like one could be the Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary. So until 2010, Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary as a protected area didn't have tigers itself. So these connected forests or these connected protected area networks that we call could be like umbilical cords that permit few tiger populations to exist as metapopulation. So that would probably essentially mean that you could have a large metapopulation, which is in scientific terms a source population, that perhaps could push out transient males or transient females into viable habitats that have potential prey. So in this context, what we assumed was that the Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary had about 20-21 tigers, or less than 20 tigers, if I fairly remember, was contiguous to the Kodiali wildlife range of Bannerghatta National Park. And somewhere it could be recognized that this could be a potentially a sink area where, you know, tigers from Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary could disperse there. Or it could be for the fact that Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary is in turn connected to other prominent source population areas such as the Bilagiri Rangan Tiger Reserve and the Menon Wildlife Sanctuary, which again now has been declared a tiger reserve. So we're looking at this trend where tigers are emerging out from their so-called source population into sink population, and sink population eventually possibly could lead into other source populations. So we still don't know whether the tiger in Bannerghatta is an indicator of the fact that, you know, tigers could have a long-term future in this area. Back then, we were clueless as well, and we really didn't know the advancements in tiger science. And so we ended up following a very crude, basic method of doing the pug mark method, which, I mean, has been critiqued by many people, especially scientists and even members of the forest department. But sometimes in areas where tigers are found in low densities, where one tiger in a 260 square kilometer area is like, it's like literally like finding a needle in a haystack situation. So we resorted to measures that probably would give us data to understand especially what this tiger was. Until then, we didn't have any photographic evidence which was very clear to understand demographic details about the animal, where the animal was going, what it was doing. So we largely categorized our approach into three forms. One was using data from the pug mark to try and measure, take some standard measurements. Of course, it's not completely reliable, but out of the 88 sample size that we had, we were fairly able to establish that this animal was an adult, like a young adult, and assumingly it was a male. And then, of course, the information that we were gathering from the field was not completely robust. We were limited to getting information from opportunistic records where people would stumble upon a tiger pug mark or stumble upon a tiger kill. And then, of course, back then we had the advancement of using camera traps, so we ended up establishing some camera traps as well. So based on these crude approaches, what we realized is the tiger was, when it initially came into the Bannerghatta area, the movements were very erratic. So now a lot of us understand that tigers are territorial. They have a defined area. They operate in that area, which can vary for a male. It can be this much for a female. That's again based on what is already published and for a particular landscape. But when suddenly in a landscape like Bannerghatta, where the tigers come for the first time, or probably has been occupying the range fairly aggressively. I mean, we initially saw it in the south of the park, which is about 90 kilometers from the north, 50 kilometers from the north aerial distance. And we suddenly had a lot of encounters in the northern region of the park, which is probably very close to the Bengaluru municipality limits of the BNP area. So based on these geo coordinates that we were able to track, again, these are not like from telemetry sources. It was again based on opportunistic records. So some of my staff members would go into the field, look at a tiger pug mark take. So we had close to about 108 geo-coordinate locations of where the tiger was using. And we really saw a sense of congregation in the northern area. Although the tiger entered the Bannerghatta from the south, but we see the animal's movement was localized towards the north. And among the four ranges, I mean, Bannerghatta again has been divided into four administrative areas only for management purposes. We realized that there was some sense of preference in the northern range. Now, this was ironically because of the fact that there were two attractive factors there. One is that the presence of the Bannerghatta Biological Park, which is the so-called zoo that we talk about, the Bannerghatta Zoo, which houses a captive population of tigers. And then also there's this waste bone disposal site that is also located somewhere in that area. So these two could have possibly been an attraction for the tiger to immediately come and explore these areas, and to a larger extent were found being localized in this region of the park, which was again so close to human domination. And the habitat around is not very, intact and not very inviolate for a large predator like the tiger. And again, like I mentioned earlier, so we were again confined to only opportunistic records of tigers. We wouldn't have a fairly robust method, nor did we have the scale in which we could design a study with so much of resources to monitor the tiger on the long term. But what we did was we used logistics as a main key driver to understand how we can come up with some fair insights. So the typical, if you read Dr. George Schaler's work way back in the 60s when he first started researching tigers in Ghana, the kill-based sampling was a fairly interesting insight. I mean, kills are, again, like if you understand any carnivore biology, feeding biology, any carnivore has a lot of insights with its kill. So the number of species it eats, the consumption rates. So we followed a method like that where the kills were monitored on a regular basis. So whenever we got a kill, we would go to the kill site, take measurements of the kill, look at the age of the animal that was killed, the status of the carcass, and also try and establish some camera traps to understand how frequent the animal was coming and visiting its kill. And what we realized when the tiger initially came into the Bannerghatta area is that the prey base, if I may say, varied aberrantly. There was a aberrant variation in the prey base. It started from natural prey to something that is feral, like from wild pig to feral cow. So there was this interim frequency in which the kills would happen also were very random. So there was, and the tiger would come, it would kill, the frequency would be more, and then the consumption would be less. So this was something that was very interesting. So a tiger would probably make a kill. I mean, in the simple language, if I may want to say that, it would make a kill and probably eat just 10 kgs of meat and just leave it, and the remaining carcass would be putrid and wasted. So we didn't realize what was going on. And then, of course, the camera trap evidence was, again, not very successful because we didn't get uniform number of kills being monitored through camera traps. Consumption, feeding rates were not, again, uniform. So what we assumed was the feeding habits are, again, very random. And it could also be possibly because of the disturbances that are there, because this tiger was killing in areas where the safari buses of the Bannerghatta Biological Park were passing through the kills very regularly. Or it could be a very behavioral response to a new tiger, a transient tiger walking into a new area, just trying to explore. So that still remains a mystery. I don't know if it's settled now, but this was something that we did way back in 2015. So if you can see the table there, it talks about the species and the part consumed and the disturbance regimes that could have probably affected. So if you see when the consumed area, the consumed part of the carcass is 5%, the disturbance is high. So there was a direct significance in that capacity. And in terms of movement, of course, we were not equipped with modern technology using telemetric devices, but we're again collecting more of coarse data from the field through pug marks and camera trap image captures. Of course, I mean, had we done with using fine scale information like using telemetry, we could have been able to give a fairly robust picture of at least the territorial area, the range use patterns. But nonetheless, we were able to understand how tiger distribution was across a temporal scale, and to an extent over a spatial scale as well. So what we realized is one range in Bannerghatta National Park, we had the encounters of tigers very uniformly, which means, like I said earlier, that there was a sense of localization. So the tiger came into Bannerghatta, wasn't walking around everywhere, but was located to certain areas. And this, again, we were dependent on for collecting this information through indirect evidences, such as cat kills, scrape markings, and things like that. But in this aspect, in understanding its presence in the area, I think the pug mark method was fairly robust in terms of our assessment. So we cataloged these pug marks and kept it for a record. So this is like in the process of discovering the tiger. I mean, of course, we knew that there was a tiger, someone had photographed it, but we were not sure about its demography. We are not sure whether it was an opportunistic arrival. So what we understood from other primary methods of collecting information, that we wanted to devise a standard camera trap protocol method. Now you understand that today tigers are monitored through camera traps. I mean, camera traps play an essential role in monitoring tiger populations across the country, and it's been widely used. And I believe recently India got into the Guinness Book of World Records for doing the largest wildlife survey anywhere in the world, and close to 2,000, 3,000 camera traps are deployed across the country. And so at that point in 2015, there was no basis in which we could monitor the tigers. So we ended up developing a customized protocol for tigers, because we by then knew where the tiger was occupying, where it was frequently moving. So we had these permanent pole traps which were established in areas where we realized that the tiger would come and move in those areas. So as a result of that, we were able to finally get some images of the tiger. And so it was like a Sherlock Holmes kind of a situation. So we got some indirect evidence, and we kind of came up with some assumptions. We had an hypothesis that it could be this, that. And then we eventually realized that this tiger was like what we had mentioned earlier, that it was a young male. and he was just in his 3 to 4 year age group, just probably left his mother, and obviously a transient male operating in a new area, trying to explore. And this was fairly insightful, especially for the forest managers, to understand what long-term plans they have for the tiger in this landscape. So with that, I'd like to come up with some quick summaries. I mean, if someone wants to read the exhaustive report that we wrote, I can probably share that report with all of you all. But so the ghost story, like I call it, I mean, the tiger is still a ghost in Bannerghatta. We still don't know more about it, and there's still a lot more to explore, to understand. So one is that we verified it to be a young male, and young male back then, 2005, I mean, 5 years now, he'd probably be an adult, probably in his breeding age. And we realized that tigers generally exhibit a wide variety of land tenure patterns. So unclear whether, this whole movement patterns moving from here. So we also had one very strange dispersal where the tiger walked out 10 kilometers from the northwest of Bannerghatta boundary. And this was back in 2015. So we still don't know whether this tiger is transient or territorial. I mean, we still hear anecdotal evidence of tiger here and there, but we're still not possibly sure whether this could be a potential tiger habitat. And if there is only a prey resource function being met, I mean, what that means is that if this habitat is available only for tiger because of prey, and once the prey gets depleted, or if there's indirect implications on the prey, that the tiger might go back to where it came from. So based on the photographic evidence that we have the tiger, we matched it with potentially all the Npca sources of tiger images across the country, and we still don't know where this tiger came from. So somewhere we're missing out on the origin of the animal, and we still don't know where it will go back, or will probably bring someone else, or find a mate, or establish a population. We still don't know. And because it's so close to Bangalore, I mean, Bannerghatta, if you understand, is a very fragmented habitat for wildlife generally, and it's so close to human domination. So the chances of dispersals are expected. I mean, anything that happens with the tiger movement, either northwest, it's probably going to come up to a forest fringe village. And there could be possible instances of conflict. We've had cases where the tiger has predated domestic fauna, such as cows and things like that. But again, not in outside protected area network, within protected area network. But it doesn't discount the fact that this animal might come into conflict with people in the future. Like I mentioned earlier, the Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary, which is again divided in the eastern and the western parts. The eastern part is taken by Tamil Nadu and the western part is taken by Karnataka, are definitely acting as sink population for BRT and Satyamangalam Tiger Reserve, which are supposedly established source population of tigers. So therefore, in order to understand the prospect of BNP as a viable tiger habitat, these two assumed sink populations from the source population needs to be greatly studied. So it's like a tap. So if you open the tap, you fill a pot, you have water filling it, and then you have holes in the pot. And if the water keeps spilling out, you need to first plug the pots, or you need to understand the process of how water from the tap fills the pot, and then the water seeps out. So in anything to do with Bannerghatta's tiger, I think it's imperative to look at how the sink populations, especially in Cavalry Wildlife Sanctuary, is working in order to realize the long-term implications of this landscape-level tiger habitat. And what is more important is that to extend these occupancy studies, we realized that prey plays a very important role. This is based on our publication in 2018. We realized that tiger in Bannerghatta has an array of prey ranging from small to large size prey. And what is interesting is that the sambar, the sambar deer, contributes to the largest proportion of ungulates that is available. And sambar is like to quote Dr. John Singh again, he says the sambar and the tiger are made for each other. So it's important that the sambar population in Bannerghatta is also stabilized over the long term. And we also noticed that if you remember the earlier map, those points where the tiger was found, and all these areas are typical valley areas, dense Nalla area where sambars are found, and that's where the tiger seem to overlap its area. I mean, this has to be a certain, but what I'm trying to understand off my head, that's what I can think of. So prey densities and understanding them using sign surveys or occupancy surveys or doing anything in the occupancy framework is imperative to understand the distribution patterns of tigers and how they potentially use the landscape over a seasonal or over a spatiotemporal scale. And also to look at, like I mentioned, to look at the long-term viability of tigers using this habitat. Because Bannerghatta, like I said, we should look beyond a protected area, but look at it as a landscape because it's contiguous to such large protected area network. So we need to wisen the idea of seeing how this would somehow pan out on the long term. So this is something that I quote from the recently published 2018 NTCA population enumeration data. So Bannerghatta has now been included, and this is a project that was commissioned to us way back in 2017, and we continue to monitor the NTCA protocol phase 1 and phase 2. We realized that, of course, Karnataka being the tiger state, I mean, it's probably lost its position now, but nonetheless, what you see from 2006 to 2018, there's a trend in the increase of tiger numbers, which means that tigers are occupying new areas that are not there before, never seen before, and certain source populations are also bulking up. So we look at a prosperous future for tigers, at least in Karnataka. And what we're also realizing that if you look at the map on the right, we are looking at new areas which have been considered as per what NTCA quotes, the tiger occupied area. So Bannerghatta National Park is considered to be a potential tiger occupied area. So we know that tiger presence in Bannerghatta is conducive, but we're not really sure whether it has a lot of population implications for the long-term future of tiger in Bannerghatta. And then, of course, the challenges definitely needs to be considered. And one is that the Bannerghatta landscape is known for its man-animal conflict issues, largely because of its habitat fragmentation and the kind of quality of habitat it has. So man-animal conflict leading to retaliatory persecution is something that's very important for tigers, especially because I'm sure you must have been seeing the news that a lot of tigers get killed and poached because of retaliation and things like that. So this aspect should be definitely considered when it comes to protecting tiger in this landscape. And on the long term, we need to look at, I mean, this is a story of 5 years. Eventually, we still get some exciting news that there's a new pug mark reported, there's a new tiger possibly, but we never know whether this is true or not. Again, this anecdotal information needs to go on, should stop for some time, and strong science with rigorous temper should take over. So assessing status of individuals with DNA capture mark recapture could be a possibly good technique to understand how these new animals are coming in and what is their links to other tiger populations that are closely located. Then, of course, for this lone tiger, it's important to track it on a finer scale to try and look at some radiocolliering interventions to see where this animal is using these areas and what it does across an annual scale. So having said that, I'd just probably like to quote one little thing that I picked up from a report. So the tiger habitat of Bannerghatta is vital for linking source populations, but are extensively used by communities. So therefore, a conservation model that promotes tiger permeability of such habitats while simultaneously securing the livelihoods of local communities is the answer. So in a landscape like Bannerghatta, not just for the tiger or for the elephant, it's important that conservation measures go hand in hand with the communities as well. It cannot be a totally inviolate tiger area, elephant area kind of a model. It needs to look at the needs of people. It needs to attend to their conservation challenges because, like I normally mention in my talk, the tiger and the elephant are potentially dangerous animals. They can be potentially dangerous for people. So therefore, to take people and their livelihoods in mind when it comes to drafting conservation measures are important. And again, to quote the NTCA 2018 report, managing conflict promptly and providing economic incentives from tigers will foster coexistence in the multiple use forest areas and ensure the long-term future of tigers. This is very pivotal. Now, people who are affected by tigers are the ones who are directly responsible for the future of the tiger in this country. So taking them into account is very important. And of course, as you all are aware, that as we celebrate the International Tiger Day, India continues to play a leading role in recovering global tiger population. And I think we should be proud of whatever achievement we've done. Of course, there are a lot of concerns whether we've done justice, not done justice, but I think India is number one when it comes to conserving tigers. And I think all of us should be proud as we celebrate the Tiger Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avinash, for that wonderful insights on the International Tiger Day. That's why St. Joseph's and A Rocha have joined in to inculcate and drive home this message. And we have good number of participants. It's interesting to note that you mentioned about Kenneth Anderson in the 50s and 70s that he recorded tigers in the southern belt. And now you are recording it in Bannerghatta. For the participants, what is very interesting of this storyline is both Kenneth Anderson and Avinash Krishnan are alumni. So, thing. Okay, Avinash is full of joy. And Avinash was also an active member of National Science Association.
They stop promoting that NSA so much, Dave. Their questions will answer.
We have taken the initiative to drive home the let's tell good things also. We have also put in all young conservationists into this talk, into this webinar. Harsha spoke, Avinash. We have Bhavna and also Dr. Vasim. Now, Avinash will stay with us. We will take up this question and answer session at the end Avinash, with your permission.
Jay, I might not be available, but if there are some questions, they can write to me. My first slide was my email ID. If there is anything like that, maybe I can take one question. And I also like to welcome our chairman, Prem Mitra. He's also here, so it's great to have him as well.
Welcome, Reverend.
Yeah, so I can just take one question because I might not be there till the end of the session, if that's okay.
One question.
One or two.
Okay, because the next speaker, Bhavana, is also ready, and we have kept a big slot at the end of the webinar. That's the reason for a general discussion. Anyway, we'll go ahead. If participants have any question, they can unmute and ask Avinash. Thank you.
Avinash?
Sir, namaste, sir. Namaste, sir. It's a pleasure.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
What is your opinion on ecotourism, man? Just now, Harsha was trying to support ecotourism because it generates a lot of revenue. I have a conflict of idea in my mind running right through. What's your opinion?
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, he said the two sides of the same coin, but I would say it's a double-edged sword because I think Bhavana, who's also here with us, has done fairly good work with the Madhya Pradesh Central Indian landscape, and I'm sure she'll be able to give you various insights about ecotourism. But I feel if it's not regulated, it's very detrimental to the forest, largely because the resources that come out of ecotourism are, again, generally, we're not sure about the transparency of how these resources are managed, because most of the tiger reserves have foundations, something like an NGO model. So some of the tiger foundations are doing it fantastically well, where they uplift local communities, and most of the ecotourism sector representatives are from the local communities. So if the concept of ecotourism if it is upheld the way it has to, then it's definitely a good model. But I'm not really sure about the transparency of how these things function. So that's in my opinion. Again, I'm not really sure. But
no,
yeah, so
I know. I respect your personal opinion. But my personal opinion, as far as I have experienced wildlife ecotourism, it creates a lot of human-animal conflict.
I'm not. I don't think so about the disturbance part, sir, because if you look at any of these protected areas, especially tiger reserve where tourism is, there's only a small portion of the land has been allocated to tourism. So if you have an area of about 200 square kilometer forest, maybe 20 square kilometers, what they actually expose these safari jeeps into it. So the remaining 180 square kilometers is left inviolate. So disturbance regimes can be questioned, and some of these tigers that come into tourism areas are the ones that are conditioned to human presence. So this could probably transcribe to behavioral changes in animals becoming more bolded with people and exploring. It has happened in the past, especially in Cobber Tiger Reserve, where tigers and tourism tigers have come out and got into conflict with people, attacked livestock. So tourism could be one of the drivers, but in terms of general disturbance to man-animal conflict and habitat fragmentation, tourism doesn't play a direct role in doing that.
Okay, thank you, Avinash.
Thank you,
As
sir.
always, very, very pleasure to hear to you.
Such a pleasure, sir. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
One more question from the participants, and then we'll go on to the next speaker. Chandana, Teresa, and Derek should be ready. Anybody? Okay, as Avinash said, you can write to him. A Rocha Field Center is also a good place to visit. So you can all make a visit to the A Rocha Field Study Center. There are initiatives related to conservation. You can get in touch. You can also Google and find out details online. Thank you, Avinash, and thank you, Reverend Prem Mitra, for being here with us. Over to Chandana. Chandana will introduce the next speaker.
Myself, Chandana from Natural Science Association. I'm happy to introduce the third speaker for today, Ms. Babana Menon, Program Manager, Last Mover and Wilderness Foundation, India. Ms. Bhavana graduated with bachelor's degree in arts from Delhi and later moved to Mumbai to pursue her post-graduation studies in journalism. She is currently employed with Last Wilderness Foundation, an NGO working towards conservation as a program manager and has particular affinities for leopards. Today she is here with us to deliver her topic on communities in conservation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Soumya. Thank you all so much for inviting me today on Global Tiger Day. I think this is the perfect day to talk about my favorite people, who are the communities who live around the tiger reserves. Am I audible to everybody? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
madam.
Okay, thank you. So before I begin, Soumya gave me a beautiful introduction. But today, what I would really want to talk about is the people who live in basically around three tiger reserves. One is Bandhavgarh, one is Kanha, and one is Panna. Since we have a time limit, I'll try to cover all three landscapes as much as I can. And actually, I want the students and you guys to ask me questions, because then it'll be fun. It'll be like a chai conversation. So can I have the next slide, please? Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, it's coordinating.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So when you see this picture, it's an extremely happy picture. And you see kiddos smiling and they're waving. And there is nothing of tragedy or fear in this picture. Can I have the next slide, please? I would like to talk about that. Yeah. But this picture was what was the reality in Bandhavgarh when I visited it in 2010. So when you see this picture, you see confusion, you see fire, you see things burned down, you see chaos. This is exactly what Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve was facing a few years back. There was a lot of animosity between the villagers and the forest department. There was a lot of human-wildlife conflict. There were incidents of electrocution of tigers. There were attacks on people also by tigers. And the relationship wasn't as the first picture seemed. So when we first visited Bandhavgarh, the field director then, Mr. C.K. Patil, he was the real torchbearer for a program called the Village Kids Awareness Program. Next slide, please. Yeah. And it was during his time that we started working very, very deeply with the forest department. And we decided, okay, hey, why don't we target the kiddos who are living around the tiger reserve? There are about 96 villages and lots of people, lots of households in around Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. So we decided, why don't we target the kids living there and take them inside the forest and have a dialogue with them? So what happens a lot of time is we feel that village kids know everything about the forest. What are you going to do? You know, I've been asked in the city, I've been asked that तुम गांव वालों बच्चों को टाइगर दिखाने क्यों ले जा रहे हो? Why are you taking village kids to see a tiger? They've already seen it. But when you actually visit a village, half the kids have only heard of the tiger as a mythological, bloodthirsty beast who's out to get them and is of no importance to villagers. So when we started visiting and taking the kids inside the forest, the whole attitude, it changed, you know. We developed this model with the department, and when the rangers and forest guards used to come with the kids, they also used to tell them कि आपके जितना बाघ हमारे लिए जरूरी है, however important the tiger is, you are doubly important for us as well. And I remember this one incident. There was this village where the village headman said, I am not going to let you take any kids from my village. One villager from my village has been attacked by a tiger, and I think it's dangerous, and you're taking them into unknown territory, and I'm not going to let you take. So I waited for a couple of days. One day, one of the child said, I want to go with you. And a couple of children also joined in on the trip, and we went to the forest. We saw the tiger really close. It went by the car, did nothing to the children. And when the children went back to the village, their message to the adults in the village was, Kitta sundar tha. They didn't say, they had nothing negative to say about the tiger. There was not a word which was used which was bad against the tiger. In fact, they said, what a beautiful animal. We want to see it again. When this happened, there was like a ripple effect, you know. Then we targeted and took almost more than 5,000 kids inside the forest. We did presentations with them. We ate lunch with them. We chilled with them. We didn't just give them gyan, because I feel I've been such a bad student all my life that I'm aversive to gyan. The more you keep telling people, you must do this, you must do this, you must save tigers, it would have been very aversive to me personally. So what we did was, it was like a picnic. We were going inside the forest, having fun, playing games, which I'll show you the slides of. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this was the safari. Okay. And in fact, there's a picture. I love telling this story because it's just so dear to me. There's a fourth picture in this collage, and there's a man with a turban, if you see. His name is Golu Singh. He was one of the people who was against us doing the program. He said, you're from the department, you don't care about us, you only care about tigers. I said, Chacha ji, aap ek baar aake dekhiye. Aap thoda sa time hamare sath spend karke dekhiye. Which means, uncle, please spend a little time with us and see. If you still don't like the program, we won't do it in the village. The day he came, luckily we saw 6 tigers. It was a mama with 4 cubs. And he was so influenced. You know, it's just about, you know, I say this a lot, and I will say this again today on Tiger Day. Conservation is not a very big umbrella. It's a lot of tiny, tiny things like a jigsaw puzzle, you know. So it was the fact that he sat in a car with us in a crisp white kurta and came with kids and saw 6 tigers, had lunch with us, had chai with us. And the fact that we were all on the same level, admiring the same thing, that I think changed the mindset. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is how we continue strengthening dialogues, because it's not, it cannot be done in one go. You have to keep talking to children. And in fact, if you see in the second picture, there's a forest ranger, Mr. Ramesh Markam, who was the ranger of the zone where all those, the picture you saw of all those cars burned down. One of his own forest officers barely escaped the angry mob that day. Why that had been done was because the teacher had been mauled by a tiger, and unfortunately he had passed away. But Mr. Ramesh Markam said, ma'am, let's try talking to the villagers. Dekhte koi aata hai ya nahi. Let's see. Once we were standing in the classroom, then one child came in, then the second child came in, then adults came in. And when that happened, we started screening a movie. And you won't believe it, almost 300 people came and sat in a classroom and watched the movie with us. And not once, twice. And I said, don't you have to go home and cook? They said, no. This is what we want to do. We want to sit and learn about forest today. Khana to hum roz pakate hain. We cook every day. But we want to do something new today. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Soumya, can you change the slide?
Yeah. So Avinash ji was talking about ecotourism activities. I heard a very little talk of it, but he's right. In a lot of ways, it is really helping conservation. Can we go to the previous slide? Tourism and conservation. Okay, so basically what he was talking about, Avinash ji, is that tourism, he was supporting tourism, and I completely agree, because I remember this example of a gentleman coming up to me and saying, tourist aata hai, they come, they see the tiger, they go and stay in a fancy lodge. No one comes to us. Hamara kya fayda hai tourism? What do we have to gain out of tourism? That set me thinking. And once I remember there was this lady from England who came down and she said, can I go on a village walk with you? So I said, okay, let's go. And she said, why don't you make this a model? So what we did was, if we can go back to the previous slide, I would like to show you something, Soumya, previous to this, after this. Yeah, after this. The slide after this. Okay. Anyway, so what we did was, yes, thank you. So what happened was the pictures you see here are from Bandhavgarh. There are people sitting on the map in the middle of a forest and having lunch. Now what happens? So I think Sir said that, it causes man-animal conflict. I would sort of disagree there, because I think when people come into the village and they sit and talk to the villagers, they understand the challenges of the villagers better. And when you pay the villagers for an experience like this, the proceeds basically directly go to the villagers, nothing comes to us. So the villagers are paid for the food, and they make ethnic food, organic food, nothing is from outside. In fact, if you see, we even use leaves, we don't use plastic at all. So when you pay these people for doing something like this, they realize ki, someone cares about us as well. So again, you're constantly strengthening that dialogue. And when you pay them for something like this, there are lesser chances that they'll go inside the forest to collect mahua, tendu, leaves to make bowls and plates. That slide will come later, but there are lesser chances they will spend their entire day in the forest. Instead of that, they will probably be more invested in activities where they can interact with tourists who are coming into the reserve, as well as this is an alternative source of livelihood. In fact, if you see the second picture, those people sitting around the fire, they're watching a documentary while sitting in the village, so that after the screening of the movie, they can talk to the villagers about it. This particular group, I remember, was a college group. And after they visited the village, it was, I think, Bharti Vidyapeeth School of Photography, Pune. And after they visited the village, the first question was, what can we do? Now, today, if India is got 70% tigers, if Madhya Pradesh is a tiger state, it's because people are actually getting involved in conservation. And tourism is a big chunk of that, where people are actually asking, how can we help? NGOs, yes, are doing a fantastic job. Forest department is brilliant, but we need more and more people to get involved. Next slide, please. Soumya, next slide, please.
There's some Soumya, if you could hear us. The next slide.
Hota
hai. She's texting me. Her Wi-Fi is down, madam. That's the reason there is some issue.
Okay. No problem. No problem, Soumya. Take your time. So should I continue talking if there are no pictures?
Yeah, as the PPT comes, we can continue with that.
Awesome.
You can share your experiences. Continue.
Sure. Okay. So I spoke about tourism and conservation. I spoke about a dialogue. And now this is Bandhavgarh. Okay. So in Bandhavgarh, whatever I've shared till now is what we've done is the Village Kids Awareness. Oh, thank you. Village Kids Awareness Program, which helps strengthen the dialogues with community members and department, and tourism related activity. Now this is an extremely special tribe called the Beggars in Kanha. Very, very shy, extremely intertwined with nature and forests, far, far away from development. They are a primitive group of tribe called the Beggars who live in the buffer zone of Kanha Tiger Reserve. And I'll give you a hint. The work we do with them is something that has been worn by the lady in the picture. It's a necklace. So the Beggars make very, very beautiful jewelry, which they have been since the time of the ancestors. But why did we get involved in this with the Beggars was because there are these tribal people, these community members spend most of the time in the jungle, used to spend most of the time in the jungle, especially the women, to collect this particular leaf called the mahul leaf, which is also called the camel foot leaf. Okay, it's really big. So what they make out of it is bowls and plates, which they then sell in the market for about 30-40 rupees. But what happens here is when they spend the whole day in the forest, because even a bowl requires about 10 leaves. So when they spend the whole day in the forest, chances of human wildlife increases, conflict increases. They could encounter bears, they could encounter tigers. So that's why the department approached us and they said, hey, can you guys do something with the ladies? And LWF, our Last Wilderness, believes very deeply that we don't want to introduce anything foreign into a community member's life ever. We don't want to teach them how to make agarbatti or diyas. This is not their skill set. So we wanted to work with a skill set they already had, which was jewelry making. So the lady you see in the picture, can I have the next slide, please, Soumya? So the lady you see in the picture, yes, thank you, is called Tisya Bai. And this was the first round of jewelry that they made. But this, again, looks easy, but the process was extremely tough because, like I said, they're an extremely shy community, very reserved. They like their chicken, you give them their mahua, and they're set for the day. They don't care about what's going to happen even 5 days down the lane. So I spent 8 months with them to convince them that, guys, you wear such beautiful jewelry. Can you make some for us? So they laughed in my face. And they're like, who's going to wear our jewelry? Are you crazy? No one's going to wear it. So I said, try. So one day, after almost 8 months of talking to them and having 100 cups of chai with them, they called me one day. One lady called Sunita called me today and said, Aap gaon aa sakte ho? Can you come to the village? When I went to the village, there were about 10 women sitting in the courtyard and they had prepared the jewelry. They said, if you like this, we are on board. Sunita was a torchbearer for us. She is a teacher in one primary school in the village itself. And she said, I have a job, but I want my fellow community members to also earn and live a dignified life. So we said, okay, next slide, please. From that, it came down to this. Look at the transformation. And it's only because of the determination of the community. We take no credit for this. It was the support of the forest department and the creativity of the community members that made this transformation happen, this transition happen. So what we did was, so the jewelry you see with the coins is called athanni. And when we showed it to a couple of people in the cities, they all said, we want this. This is beautiful. So what we did was, because the Begas can't market the jewelry themselves, we partnered with an online organization called NatureWorks India, and we use sustainable packing. We use paper. Again, we don't use plastic anywhere, and we sell it online. And the proceeds go back to the Bega community members. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are our fantastic artists. So I always encourage people to go and meet them. In fact, we're working in about 4 villages around Kanha Tiger Reserve with 50 odd women. And the most interesting part about this slide is the middle slide, in my opinion, where the men are present. So you'll be surprised to know that the men were very against the women getting involved. Actually, it's not surprising, but they were very against it. They used to come and laugh. They used to say, "Koi nahi kharidega. Nobody's going to buy their jewelry. These guys are fooling you. It's not going to work out." So we said, okay, no problem. We used to go, the women used to come running from the fields, from wherever they were, used to come and give us the jewelry. We used to pay them on the spot. And one day I noticed, instead of the women, the men are running from the houses to come and give us the jewelry. So I said, Kya hua? What happened? How come you're coming? They said, no, even we want to get involved. We want to help our wives. We want to be supportive, which was a huge, huge social change. Again, conservation, again, showcased or proved that it's not a very big, massive change. It's a lot of social, small social changes. So the men said, in case our wife is pregnant or in case she is unwell, we'll make the jewelry for you. You tell us the orders. We want to get involved. Next, please. These are our customers. These are, so this is to show you how well it's been appreciated, not just nationally, but internationally as well. People have bought it for themselves, their friends, and we've had exhibitions, and the response has been phenomenal. And this is all because a community was involved in making this. I think if I sat and made jewelry, nobody will buy. I'll be so bad at it. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So again, Avinash, this is, if Avinash is there, this is another example of community conservation activities that we do. I don't want to just sell products. You know, I don't want community members to be seen as a project who people are just giving funds for, or they just know about on it website. I want them to personally go and meet them, which is why also we started these conservation activities. So what we've done is we've started something called the Bega Jewelry Workshops in the different villages where these women are working. And they wear their traditional attire, like you can see in picture number 2 and picture number 3. And usually there's someone playing the traditional Bega folk song, and you can sit and make jewelry with the Bega ladies. That way you also understand the lives of Begas, as well as you understand how much hard work goes into making a piece of jewelry. It looks beautiful and simple, but there's a super amount of hard work that goes into it. Also, what happens is when you go down to these villages to meet the community members, there's a sense of equality, right? They feel that, you know, people do care about us. We are not just saying it to make them feel good. When they see, and I remember why this inspired me, this particular conservation activity, why it inspired me to start it was because once I saw a lodge, naturalists from a lodge coming into the village and just driving through the village. So I said, why aren't you getting off the car and meeting the people? Just taking pictures from the car will not make people understand what is actually going on in their lives. So he said, no, I don't know anybody here. I said, I'm here. Why don't you get off? And that day particularly, there was a Bega wedding in the village. The tourists not only got off, they went and blessed the bride. They saw the entire proceedings and they said, this is even better than seeing a tiger, which I think was the biggest compliment the tourists could have given. So, you know, these things help because, I don't know, I think it's just human nature where you just want to sit and connect with people rather than just reading about them or just giving money. Next, please. Another great community we work with are the Pardis of Panna. So these guys are extremely different from the Begas. So these guys were a nomadic community. But one thing that has changed about this particular population in Panna is they used to be hunters, traditional hunters, but they don't hunt anymore. So 2009, unfortunately, Panna lost all its tigers, and Pardis are said to be the main reason behind them because they're amazing trackers. You know, they used to be used by the Maharajas once upon a time, by the British once upon a time for hunting and tracking of animals. But once the British left, once the Maharajas left, these guys were seen as criminals. There's a major stigma still attached to them, saying, yaar, ye to Pardi hai. Pardi is almost like an abuse. I mean, it's the saddest thing that can happen to a community, but that's how it is even today. So before I met the Pardis, even I was extremely apprehensive. I was wondering whether I would be able to work with someone who has hunted for a living. But when I visited the hostels for the first time, you can see the picture. It's nothing but happiness. So there are 2 Pardi hostels that were set up by the Forest Department in 2009 after the tigers disappeared to basically mainstream the society. And the field director asked us to come and meet the children to see whether we can do something with them. So what we did was we spent about 2 months with the kids, mentored them, spent time with them, spoke to them about clothing, hygiene, how to talk to people. And next slide, please. And we realized that, you know, this is a community that's been severely misunderstood and needs to be accepted, which is when we started something called Unnati, Project Unnati. Now, Unnati means progress. So to give start progress of this incredible community, we did vocational training courses for the girls and boys in the community. For the girls, it was stitching. For the boys, it was electrician training and kabaddi players. And there was meditation and there was yoga and there was sports. And they are such great kabaddi players. They look like leopards leaping into the air when you see them playing kabaddi. It's just out of this world. Next, please. Yeah. And constant work with this community member, this is so proud of them. Constant work with community members always bears results, because no matter what people say, in fact, I've been told by people that Pardis will never improve, you'll regret working with them. I haven't, not till this date. In fact, after working with them, 5 of those same kids you saw in the first slide, from there they have reached here where they are actually pursuing their graduation. From living in the forest to coming to the hostel to now pursuing their graduation. We are supporting their education. We are helping them with their kabaddi, with their sports. And the boys are doing agriculture, BSc agriculture, and the girls are doing arts. And they are the first line of Pardhi graduates from the community. Next, please. So when we started working with the kids, the adults in the community started saying, why are you not working with us? Why are you ignoring us? We said, we're not ignoring you. What would you like to do? They said, we like to roam around. We said, yeah, but roaming around cannot be an option. You have to tell us what you would like to do. So they said, हमको जंगल के बारे में सब पता है. So which translates as, we know everything and a lot about the forest and its animals. And they were absolutely right. So what we did was, we took a batch of boys in the beginning, and we said, and with the help of Taj Safaris, we helped polish their skills, not change, polish their skills about how to talk to people, how to show them the forest, and how to take people for a walk in the forest, which then translated into, next slide please. Something called Walk with the Pardis. So basically, yeah, that's our logo. That's our boys and girls taking people for a walk. We in fact have trained girls also for this purpose. If you see our Facebook page, you'll be able to see a lot more photos of this beautiful community. So yeah, Walk with the Pardis is basically a walk in the territorial division of Panna Tiger Reserve, and it's been met with amazing response, just as the Bega jewelry has, probably because it's a traditional skill set and they're masters of it. So these guys can also mimic animal and bird calls. Like if you shut your eyes, you can't tell whether it's a human being calling or an animal calling. In fact, the peacock calling is just incredible. So, and the trail is also very beautiful. There are really beautiful gorges that you can visit while in Panna. And this is basically meant as an alternative source of livelihood for the community members. Next, please. Yeah, this is in Panna. So apart from the walk, what we do is we've also involved villagers in a village called Ranipur, which is opposite the trail. So the trail where these Pardis take people for a walk, it's extremely rich in biodiversity. There are bears, leopards, guests have seen a leopard, hyenas, foxes, extremely rich in biodiversity. So what we decided was, and it's a very crucial wildlife corridor for tiger dispersal, that entire area. So what we've done is we've also involved villagers from Ranipur, and we started village walks there, as well as lunches, dinners, breakfast, snacks with the villagers. So after you finish the walk, you can come and chill in Ranipur village and have chai, you can have nashta, you can have dinner, you can have lunch with the villagers. And what you see above, first picture, those are whistles. So these whistles used to be used by Pardhi community members once upon a time to hunt birds. Okay, because when you play this whistle, and it's a specialized skill, it imitates the francolin perfectly. Okay, you should hear that. I'll try to share it with Avinash, and maybe he can share it with you or Soumya. It's beautiful. So these guys used to first earlier wear it around the neck like a pendant and walk through the forest to trap the birds. So we said, why not make it a conservation collectible? So now we are selling these whistles. These are very beautiful. They are made from kher and tendu bark. So we sell them online, the same place where the jewelry is sold. And again, the proceeds are given back to the community members. And we also have workshops with the tourists where they can sit with the Parthi community members, carve these whistles, and also there's a small bead. I think it's most probably a Rita bead. It's dried fruit, and then they carve on it. Can you imagine the skill of these guys? That such a small bead also they can carve animal motifs, they can carve the name on it, they can carve the lives from the forest on it. So we encourage tourists to see all this so that they understand the lives of the Parthis from the Parthis and not just from us. Next, please. This is the first batch of boys who trained from the Walk with the Parthis. We had given them uniforms. The field director had given all of them certificates. And the next time you go to Panna, please, 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 please go on a walk with them. Yeah, Soumya, next slide, please. You had gone to the next slide. Yeah, this is some of the feedback. We also keep a feedback register that people can fill after the walk. So this is some of the heartfelt. In fact, I remember the biggest compliment to us was two people. One said it was worth missing the safari for tiger safari. I would rather do the walk with the Parthis rather than do a tiger safari. And another person said, till now, Corbett Tiger Reserve was my favorite park till I came to Panna and met the Parthis. So I think those are the biggest, these are the success stories of when you work with community members, when people convert towards just coming to see the forest, just staying in their lodge, to visiting villages, having local food, meeting the community members, and then saying we will come again. That is the changing face of conservation that we definitely want to see. Next, please. I think little only is left. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. And to the last program with community members we've done in Panna. So Parthis, yes. Ranipur village, yes. But another section of people who are extremely imperative to work with in Panna are the villagers. Like you remember, I had told you that we work with villagers in Bandhavgarh, and there are 96 villages in Bandhavgarh that we work with. So there are about 49 villages in Panna that we needed to work with. We worked with almost 37. So another problem Panna faced, apart from poaching, which was earlier, now there's no poaching in Panna, is forest fires. So it's an extremely dry landscape. So Panna was very rife with forest fires, and the field director said, please do something about forest fires. You're working with Parthis, great, with the kids, great, conservation activities, great, but how do we protect the forest from fires? So we initiated the program called Fire Prevention Agni but Rokne Ka jo program hai, Agni Prevention. And we took the villagers into, the adults basically, not the kids this time, to the forest. You see that lady with the binoculars, that was the first time ever that she had used the binoculars and seen a crocodile for the first time in her life. So Panna has a very beautiful river called Ken, Karnavati, and there are lots of muggers there. So that was the first time, and she wasn't ready to give the binoculars to anybody after that. She said, this is mine. I'm going to watch the forest. So, you know, when you see these people changing, it's because you're accepting them and you're taking them in as your own. So when we took them to the forest, we said, this is yours. It's not our forest. It's yours. So do you want to protect it? So they said, yes. Not only will we protect it, we are going to stop other villagers from setting fires to the forest. And it became like a competition. So there were villages like Jardhoba, Koni, which are the most notorious with regard to forest fires. They said, no, now if Koni is not going to set fire, even I am not going to. So we also have given them incentives. We have given them recognition, certificates, rewards, solar lanterns as a mark of appreciation for not setting fires to the forest. And this has worked brilliantly. And the greatest success story from this program is there hasn't been a single case of forest fires in the last 2 years. With the Parthis, the success story is there hasn't been a single case of poaching in Panna since 2010. So it's not so much to do with us than the resolve of the community members. In fact, if you visit LWF page today, Instagram and Facebook, we've put a couple of videos where we've not spoken, but they are speaking from the field, saying what did they learn and how are they protecting the forest. They are ultimately the backbone of conservation, and once you understand that, conservation becomes super easy. Next, please. Last, extremely special project that we did was that, again, Kanha is a very visionary management. All forest officers are brilliant, whoever we work with, but Kanha especially is extremely visionary when it comes to their projects. And I remember there's an assistant director of Kanha Tiger Reserve called Mr. Surendra Khare. And he is the one who's been the vision behind the nature education programs as well. And one day he got a call from this little girl called Tulsa who couldn't see. She was a visually impaired child. And she said, I've heard you're taking all the village kids inside the forest. Why can't we go? I also want to see the forest. We also want to see the forest. So he said, that's a great thought, but we'll have to think about a model for it. So what we did was we've developed models for visually impaired children and hearing impaired children, and we've taken them inside the forest. And I think it's been one of my most, I keep saying this, everything is memorable, but I think this has been one of my most memorable projects that I've been part of, because as the title suggests, nature never discriminates. So why should we? Who are we to discriminate against people? So I remember with the hearing impaired children, we did a presentation in sign language and we took them on nature trails. With the visually impaired children, what we did was we took them on a trail, and everything was sensory. So they used to touch trees. We played bird calls for them, animal calls for them, so they recognized. So the next day when they went inside the forest, they actually heard those sounds and related. Saying, oh, ye to wo pakshi thi. Oh, ye to bandar chilla raha hai. And they also, so the visually impaired children were lucky enough that there was a tiger walking by their car. And in my head, foolishly, I was thinking, I wish they could see it. That was extremely ignorant of me, I think, because the child looked at me and said, she just touched my arm. She said, मैंने आज tiger देखा मैम, मैंने life में पहली बार tiger देखा. I said, what did you feel? She said, कितना सुंदर होगा ना. वो जब चल रहा था तो कितना बड़ा होगा, क्योंकि जब चल रहा था, when it was walking, I could hear the grass crushing between its big paws. मतलब कितना बड़ा होगा, it must be so big. So I said, the journey with these kids was incredible. In fact, I wrote a small book about this that's also online. I can share that, about Tulsa and Mr. Khare, because they are the heroes of the story. And yeah, it's been brilliant. In fact, the visually impaired children have come thrice after that, and every time to Kanha, and they've said that this has been the best experience of their lives. Next, please. Thank you. So I'm done troubling Soumya now. That's in fact our Bega community members in Kanha, some of the families who work on the Bega jewelry. So yeah, I'm done here. And if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm Tressa. So now the session will be open for questions. I request the audience to unmute yourself and ask your questions. Only 3 questions, please.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
I'd like to know the name of the river in Panna again.
Okay.
Is this stuck? Teresa, you're there?
Yes, sir.
Bhavna ma'am's left, sir. Probably some network issues.
Okay, okay. Then we'll, if Bhavna is joining, fine. Meanwhile, we can have Derek to render the vote of thanks to Bhavna, but Bhavna is not here. It would be nice if.
She might be trying to join in, sir. We'll wait for a minute, probably.
Sure, Viola. Yeah. Participants, bear with us. I believe there's some connectivity issue with the speaker's end. We'll wait for I believe the NSA office bearers can get in touch with Bhavna. Yeah, we have got message that she will join in a while. Yeah, Bhavna is joining us back. Bhavna, you're here. You got to unmute, I believe.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, Bhavna. Yeah. Can take that question. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions?
Participants have anything to discuss of the initiatives that Bhavna
Ma'am, we
is
didn't
involved
hear
in?
the answer, ma'am.
Which one? Sorry. Oh, it's called Karnavati.
Karnavati. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. No problem. I'm so sorry.
Can we speak to Bhavana after the last presentation, please?
Yeah, that depends on if Bhavna is free or if she has some other engagement.
Fine.
No, I'm free.
Oh, please.
Thanks
Thanks a
so
lot.
sweet. That's so sweet.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead with the next speaker, Dr. Wasim, and then take up all the questions in the general discussion. Thank you, Bhavna.
Okay,
Derek, if you're here, for thanks, out of thanks.
Yes, sir. I'm here. Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah. Continue, Derek.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of Natural Science Association, Department of Zoology, extend a very hearty word of thanks to you, ma'am, for your valuable time. I would like to thank you, ma'am, for inspiring us with your excellent presentation. Thanks for sharing your experience and viewing the village's tradition and culture to us. The way you explain as a topic is very explanatory. I'm sure that the participants enjoyed it. Once again, thank you and have a great day, ma'am.
Thank you.
If Balaji is around, can introduce the third speaker.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad to introduce the third speaker of the day, Dr. Wasim Mirza. He is a veterinarian and also holds specialization in wildlife medicine and conservation. He began his professional career in researching malarial pathogen in near-threatened New Zealand falcon and other raptors in the region. Dr. Mirza is currently based in Mysore with the Department of Veterinary Science. His areas of expertise include wildlife conservation, zoonosis, pathology, anesthesia, and critical care. Today, he's here with us to deliver a talk on role of veterinarian in wildlife conservation with reference to the tiger rescue and rehabilitation. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Just a second, have patience with me until I get this loaded. Hi, am I clear enough?
Yes, sir.
Let me know if I can begin.
Yes, sir, you can start.
So I'm not in control of the presentation anymore. Anyway, I think I'll start.
Yeah. Dr. Wasim, you're running the slides or? Okay.
No, anything is fine. Anything is fine.
Fine, sir. If you could do it at your pace.
Yeah.
Or if you want one of our students.
No. I'll be happy to do it. Just let me know if I can begin, and I'll be more than happy to start.
Yes. Please start. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me over. A very happy International Tigers Day to you. It's definitely a very good time to be alive. We are living amidst tigers, and in numbers that are growing beyond what we expected to begin with. We share at least 2% of our national space with one of the largest big cats in Asia. And where's my presentation? Hello?
Yes, sir. We will just check with that.
Yeah.
Is Soumya coordinating the slide share? Or, sir, if you could restart sharing the slide like you did last time. And
sure, no problem.
is it okay, sir? Happening?
It's loading.
Okay.
It's taking time. I don't know why. Should I just control the slides?
Yeah, it's under your control now. Totally.
Okay, it's here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Dr. Wasim, proceed.
All right. So I'm saying that we share at least 2% of our landmass with the Royal Bengal tigers, and over the past decade we have grown at least close to 45 to 50% of our tiger population, and I think it's a very good increase. But it's not all good news. We still have a lot of work that's left to do. If I can just bring about an overview of how tiger conservation takes place and whose purview it happens. It's under the purview of the Union Ministry of Forests and Climate Change. And there's also another separate body called the Npca, the National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is again chaired by the Union Minister. So this body specifically looks out for the needs and the well-being of the tigers. It can their work profile goes about from anything from poaching to captures, rescues, relocations, reintroductions, and community welfare and things like that. I'd like to touch upon the causes of decline in tiger populations. I think that was not explained in great detail in the past three sessions, but I'm not going to be taking a lot of time on that, but I'd still like to touch upon the topic. We've heard this several times in the past. There's been plenty of habitat destruction and industrialization as the population booms. And this has definitely caused forests to break up into patches and pushes large cats such as tigers, whose population is already going up, uh, and forces them to step out of the forests and interact with humans, bringing about the issue of man-animal conflict. And then we also have this very well-known poaching or trafficking racket. It starts all the way from South India and it reaches all the way through the North Indian plains, Nepal, Tibet, and then finally into China. And it doesn't seem that we don't hear a lot about poaching these days, but it definitely does exist from very small circles to big rings and rackets. I just hope, sorry, why is
I believe Dr. Wasim, it's under your control. Only you can share. I just checked with the students. So
I don't know why my presentation keeps. Yeah. But apart from poaching, man-animal conflict, and habitat destruction, we've been seeing a few new issues with tiger conservation that are cropping up lately. Low prey density is one of them. We have started to lose ungulate prey that the tiger definitely needs to survive and reproduce on. That is one of uh, the issues that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. But apart from that, we've recently observed a lot of inbreeding among wild tigers around the Assam and Kaziranga belt. Uh, there was a lot of furor with regards to this pic. I think it was taken by one Mr. Mahesh, and a lot of people were excited to capture the strawberry tiger, as they called it. But it's not great to have tigers like these in the wild because these are inbred, and that is also because of habitat fragmentation. They haven't been able to move around a lot, so they tend to breed among their own circles, and that gives rise to a lot of genetic diseases and further hampers the growth and reproductive capacity of tigers. And another very alarming trend that we are seeing among wild tigers is the spread of emerging diseases, as we call them. The most recent being the canine distemper virus, which is a very, very common fatal viral antigen among stray dogs. It causes a devastating neurological disease for which there is no cure. And because stray dogs have started manifesting around buffer zones, they've started to come in contact with tigers and somehow spread the disease to these big cats. And we haven't calculated any fatalities or cases among tigers, at least not in South India. But there have been reports of canine distemper fatalities in Siberian tigers in Russia, and very recently in Gir lions in Gujarat. So the day is not far when the tigers that live close to homes, close to our house, I'm sorry, close to our homes, will get affected by canine distemper in the future if it's not controlled. The stray dog population is not taken care of. So I was trying to touch upon my topic with the contribution of wildlife veterinarians or veterinarians in general towards tiger conservation. So what is it that we do? We don't hear a lot about the role of vets with regards to wildlife conservation. So I just thought I'd throw some light on that. So our job is it entails immobilization, whether physical or chemical, depending on the situation, to capture, rescue, relocate, reintroduce wild animals. It can be anything from tigers, bears, elephants, rhinos, you name it, but we'll stick to tigers for today. Apart from that, we lend a hand with postmortems for any natural or unnatural death that is reported to us. So our word stands in court. We use a lot of forensics to determine the cause of death and the time of death, the age of the animal, the sex. Sometimes the bodies are charred, sometimes they drown, they're beyond recognition. So we chip in with a lot of forensic expertise as well to identify the species and the lineage of the animal and possibly the cause for its death. And just like I was telling you about emerging diseases in wild animals, we've seen rabies and now we're seeing canine distemper. We've had tuberculosis. We've got a lot of pathogens that are spread through ticks. So we do a regular check and we keep an estimate of the diseases that are present in the area and what to expect in the near future. Apart from that, what we also do is we vaccinate domestic livestock that live close to forests, forest buffer zones and core areas, so that diseases don't jump from domestic to wild populations. Like for example, we have a foot and mouth disease problem that is very common among cattle. And we have had cases in elephants, we've had cases in gaur, which again, the death of gaurs spells disaster for the population of tigers. So we try to vaccinate and prevent zoonotic diseases from spreading. And there my presentation goes again.
I hope nobody else is taking control over the slides.
No, somebody just took control a couple of minutes back. So I'm really sorry. I have no idea why this is happening.
No problem. I think this is what happens with this technicalities, that anybody can get it.
It's easier to speak on a stage, isn't it? Anyway, yeah. Right. So apart from controlling diseases, we also lend a hand in treatments and diagnostics wherever required. We try not to interfere too much with even if animals in the wild are sick, unless they are very important animals. Like if there's a single dominant male in the area, and we can't afford to lose that. If there's an animal that has been caught in a snare, it's handicapped and it requires immediate help. So in cases like that, is when we step in. Otherwise, if there's a natural infighting and fight for dominance among animals and things like that, we don't interfere with every little thing. So only when it's absolutely required. Otherwise, we prefer to leave them alone. We do a lot of captive breeding in zoos, so that the burden on the animals that are there in the forest to be sourced to zoos and things like that does not happen. We make sure there's a healthy population, captive population of animals that just circles among captive places, and the wild animals are not touched by any means. So this is an overview of what veterinarians have to contribute in terms of conservation. So my main topic of today is the management of conflict tigers. So what exactly is a conflict tiger? The NTCA describes a conflict tiger as an animal that is regularly straying into human-dominated landscapes. Somebody's taking control of my presentation again. Anyway, could you please go back to that slide?
If the NSA office bearers can keep vigil of what's happening.
Two people took control of my slide.
Okay, if there's any participant who is very much interested in doing that, you're most welcome to volunteer, but please keep the slides running.
Excuse me, sir. Yes, sir. Hello?
Hello, yeah, are you talking to me? I can hear you.
Slides are not running.
Yeah, because it got shut down. As soon as somebody took control, it went down.
It shows like take control, and the first slide only is seen on the display.
You're not seeing any other slide?
Right now.
Yeah, now it's visible. Ajay, I think it's visible, right?
Are you seeing it now? The origin of conflict tigers?
Yes, yes.
Okay. How about you let me control the slides for now then?
I don't know. Here it is being. Yeah, Ajay, your inputs are welcome. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. No, you want to tell something?
Shall I take
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Slide second is shown, and it shows that take control. So to the presenter, if I give that.
No, if Dr. Wasim only can run, then it
No,
can
I'll
go
run
on.
it. I'll be happy to run.
Yeah, that's all.
It's not. It's not much. I think I'll
So
wind
that
up.
in the pace in which you want, you
Yeah.
can use the slide. I request if there are any participant who is doing it, we'll avoid it for now. Yes, doctor, please continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was saying that the Npca describes tigers, conflict tigers, as tigers that regularly stray into human habitats and can or may pose a risk to humans in terms of lifting cattle or hunting humans for food and things like that. So, what exactly makes a conflict tiger is first the shrinking size of the forests. Now we are in a situation where the Wildlife Protection Act is doing a tremendous job. We have a very good increase in tiger numbers, but at the same time, we also have a parallel increase in human population and shrinking of forest cover. So that's causing tigers to venture more and more outside the territories and exposing themselves to humans. Then we also have this question of ecotourism that was brought about quite frequently in the previous talks. How important, how beneficial ecotourism is in terms of tiger conservation is a question that is left for time to be answered. Then we also have cattle grazing. In fact, when it comes about ecotourism, I think I'll give you a small anecdote about the tiger capture that I had been to. Cattle grazing in buffer zones and sometimes even venturing into core areas by the farmers exposes tigers to both cattle, which are food for consumption, and also to humans, because what usually happens is that when a tiger happens to attack a cow or a bull, the herder is almost always nearby and he rushes in to, I don't know why, to try and chase a tiger away. And he happens to be a secondary victim of collateral damage. And that introduces the tiger to human hunting. So this is the chance occurrence that converts tigers from cattle lifters to hunting humans. Apart from that, we have old age, we have injuries. The most common injury in tigers being porcupine quills that pierce their tongue and their lips. It incapacitates them. They're not. They have abscesses in the jaws. The teeth get spoiled, and they live a life of life in pain. They can't open their mouth. So they start venturing out for easier food, and they chance upon poultry farms or again cattle sheds, and then eventually onto humans and sometimes kids and women. So these are the few things that render a tiger a conflict animal. And once it's a conflict animal, you see it very frequently stepping out of the forest for survival. But what happens to conflict animals? What has been happening to conflict animals, conflict tigers over the ages, and what is the situation now? So there was a time in British ruled India, or the time before that, where people would go on elephant backs. It used to be called a khedda operation. They used to channel tigers into narrow pathways and into a pit to hunt. So that's how it began. And eventually, after the Wildlife Protection Act was brought into force, tiger conservation took an upper hand. And although hunting of tigers was banned, what still prevailed was something I call legalized trophy hunting. So, a person, a hunter of repute, would be outsourced by the department or by the government to put down a conflict tiger instead of making any attempt at capturing it or trying to rehabilitate it. And it happened even until early last year, where I think the most recent one being the tigress in Maharashtra that was shot, and a lot of furore has been happening around that. So we really need to move, and I think we have, to a great extent, moved from glorified trophy hunting to safe capture, rescue, and rehabilitation of tigers in general. So this is a very oversimplified view of how a conflict tiger is captured in the wild by forest staff and veterinarians. So if you've read Jim Corbett or Kenneth Anderson enough, you would know that every capture, every situation is different. So I have definitely oversimplified it for the sake of the presentation. So what we generally do is once we have news of a conflict tiger roaming the area, we set up camera traps. Sometimes, depending on the area, it can be from as few as 50 camera traps to about 300, 400. And we try to capture an image of the tiger and confirm if it's the same one, because sometimes you can have more than one tiger living in the same area. So it's important to get the right animal. So once we get the camera trap images, we forward them to what we have an information technology cell in the forest department that has pictures of all the tigers in India. So we compare stripe patterns and we establish a positive identity of the tiger. Sometimes we have enough samples available, like the fur, saliva, or scat. We send those to forensic testing to confirm the genetic phenotype of the animal for confirmation after the capture or during. So then once that is done, we chart out all the locations of cattle kills, human sightings, no matter even if it's a rumor, if there really has been a sighting, even if there has not been one, we still chart it out, locations of pug marks, and we arrive at a very comprehensive map that holds the pathway of the tiger. And it's easier to predict at a point where you might or may not see the tiger next. Once we have a decent idea of where we might find the conflict tiger, we either go on foot, which is very, very risky and it's not advised, but depending on the terrain, sometimes we have to take that risk, or we go on elephant back. Elephants are the only animals that can take you close enough to the tiger so it can be darted in the wild. And we try to set up cages initially with or without bait, with the hope that the tiger might walk in and get captured on its own. It seldom succeeds. So our only resort at that point is chemical immobilization. So we use general anesthetics in tranquilizer darts, and we go on elephant back, and we call this a combing operation. So this can take days, it can take weeks, sometimes months. And at the point where we are close enough to the tiger to dart, we tranquilize it and we render it immobile or sedated. Once that is done, that is when our actual work begins. We rush to the tiger and we check for its physical parameters, we check for injuries, and we collect a blood sample if required. And once a general examination is done, we throw a net over it, and then we transfer it to a rehab center through a cage. And once it's in rehab, we keep it there for a few days. We give it a few medications if required. If there are any injuries, we treat those. And we observe it for any signs of senility or old age or any other hidden diseases that it might be carrying. So until last year, trophy hunting was a thing. State governments would commonly hire reputed hunters to put down these animals. But after a very successful tiger capture in Bandipur in October 2019, a lot of things, a lot of old rusted gears started working again. And we have now come to the point where no hunters are allowed to put down conflict tigers. That has been done for forever. In fact, it has gone to the point where you can't even use the word man-eater anymore. So you're only allowed to call them problem tigers or rogue tigers or conflict tigers. You can't use the word man-eater. So I think this is a very, very welcome move. And so these are the kind. Now this move is going to be of benefit to all the tigers in the future, since there's no question of them being hunted down is ever going to arise. So once they are in rehab centers, we have two of them, one in Bangalore and one in Mysore. These are the two primary rehab centers. A few more are on the cards. And like I said, we do an observation and a thorough physical exam. And apart from that, the tigers in rehab centers could either be temporary residents or permanent ones, depending on their condition. If they're too old, if they lost claws and canines, or if they require long-term medicines because they suffer from diseases like thyroid issues and diabetes and stuff. So that is when we can't release them into the wild, and they're going to be there for the rest of their life. So if they are healthy enough to be released back, we do something called a soft release or a reintroduction. It can either be in an area that's close to where it was captured but far from human settlements, or it will be in a completely new territory that was once filled with tigers and is now bereft, or it has enough prey base to support more tigers. So it's a very calculated decision to decide where to release a problem tiger, but it has been done a lot, and a few of them have been very successful. We've had tigers that were once used to hunting humans and consuming them. Once after the introduction, they've gone back to their old ways. They've had cubs, and they seem to be doing well. So, but there are a few pointers that need to be kept in mind when you relocate a tiger or reintroduce a tiger to a new habitat, especially if it's a conflict animal. We have to radio collar it. It's mandatory that you radio collar a tiger that is due for reintroduction, and it has to be reintroduced in a zone where there's no other dominant male to counter the tiger's survival. It has to be away from human settlements or from cattle farms for to make sure that the tiger doesn't go back to its old ways. Apart from that, we do a very regular monitoring of the tiger that has been reintroduced to make sure that it doesn't get into trouble. So some tigers that end up in rehab centers and are not fit to be released in the wild. So these tigers serve a few important roles in terms of conservation. They are there for they're used for captive breeding. Like I said, it helps introduce a new and fresh gene pool into the already existing captive population of tigers. So this ensures that no genetic diseases are taking place in zoos. They're not capture tigers are not cannot be used to exhibit in zoos, so they're always going to be out of public view. But they will be used in the background for research. We'll use them to understand their behavior. They provide an excellent opportunity to observe their movements, their disease pattern, their genetic makeup in a closed and controlled setting. And if, uh, once you have a tiger that is fit for breeding, and if it introduces enough cubs in zoos, though in an ideal world you would not want any zoos to function, but sadly it's not the world we live in. At least they reduce the burden on zoos to keep producing more tigers, because eventually zoos get footfall if they have big cats, and that the finances that they come up with in terms is which will in turn help conservation in general. So if I have to summarize my talk, the ultimate success you would see in tiger conservation is only through increasing forest cover. We need several hundred hectares for each tiger and at least 500 ungulates for one tiger in its lifetime. So, and it has to be bereft of human intrusion. So unless we are able to provide such huge tracts of land, tiger conservation is still successful. Tiger conservation is a long road ahead for all of us. And I was trying to highlight the point that we have come quite far in terms of not shooting down tigers, even if they have been found to consume humans and cause loss of life and limb for the poor communities in our country. There's no more trophy hunting. It's not glorious to hunt down tigers and pose with them anymore. And because shooting sets a very bad precedent for future management of wildlife conflict. It's almost, it used to be like a knee-jerk reaction. Every time you heard of a leopard or a tiger that has strayed out of the forest, the first response would be to shoot it down, especially if it's known to have consumed humans. But now we have the means to provide them at least a chance at survival, if not in the wild, at least in captivity. And this will fuel a lot of compassion in the public in general. So with this, I'd like to end my talk. I'm really sorry for the disturbances with my presentation that had occurred earlier. So with this, I'd like to wish you all a very happy International Tigers Day, and you can feel free to reach out to me at any point on my email or by phone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wasim sir. I guess participants have gained insights on your topic. So now the session is open for discussion. Any volunteers can unmute yourself and ask questions.
Hi. So I had a question.
Was this to me? Because I think this is a general discussion. Or is it to me?
Oh, it was for you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sure.
in order to get into wildlife veterinary, what is the
Yeah.
procedure after bachelor's in veterinary science? And also, how does one get to work with the forest or anything after this? And do they teach about animal behavior, camera trap, immobilizing, etc. during this?
Ma'am, the veterinary science, you can get into your bachelor's through your NEET, or I think now it's through NEET. When I was there, it was through CET. Your bachelor's covers a very generalized theoretical and practical part. You can treat anywhere from guinea pigs to elephants in your bachelor's, but you don't touch upon every aspect as much as you should. So it's expected that after your bachelor's, you would want to specialize in the kind of field that you want to gain expertise in. So you can either become a surgeon, an ophthalmologist, you can become a gynecologist, and some of us, like me and a lot of my other colleagues, we choose wildlife medicine and conservation to gain expertise in handling wild animals. So that is where we're actually taught the techniques of wildlife immobilization. We're taught conservation biology. We learn about camera traps. We learn about line surveys and the diseases that affect wild animals and cross-species infections and zoonosis and things like that. So you'll have to eventually gain specialization in this field if you would want, to gain some expertise. And how you work with wild animals is one, I work with the government. I consult with the forest department very regularly. So the forest department itself doesn't have sanctioned posts for veterinarians. So they are all leased out or loaned out by the Department of Veterinary Sciences to work on wild animals. So maybe hopeful one day the forest department will have posts of their own, which is going to be very helpful. So otherwise, you can work with a lot of NGOs that rescue and treat urban wildlife. But if you talk about wildlife in general, you can work in zoos on contract basis as a vet, or sometimes even through the government. But I think mostly it's through the government service that you get to work up close with wild animals, if that's what you're trying to ask.
So they do have separate masters in wildlife veterinary.
Yes, of course. I have a master's in wildlife medicine and conservation. There is a separate master's course. It's offered in Karnataka as well.
Okay, thank you, sir.
No worries.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, have you come across some injured reptiles too?
Yeah, plenty.
So, how different is treating a reptile from a mammal?
Very, very different. It depends on which mammal also. An elephant is different from a tiger. Reptiles, you have the anatomy itself is very different. So is the physiology. You have, for example, if I have to compare between vipers and pythons and cobras, cobras have venom glands and the fangs that are very different from vipers. Even in vipers, you have pit vipers and non-pit vipers. Pythons don't have fangs, they don't have venom, so they have a very different salivary gland anatomy. Apart from that, their anatomy is very similar to birds. They do have functional lungs, out of which one lung extends all the way to the tail. One is just at the level of the chest. So when we're treating them and when we're injecting them, we have to make sure that we don't puncture the lung and things like that. So it's a very, very different world.
Okay, so it depends from animal to animal.
Yes, even species to species.
Oh, thank you, sir.
No problem.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
You spoke, there was an incident in Bandipur wherein a tiger killed an old man. So
yeah,
I was there.
Two of them.
Okay, when we went, they said it's
this?
1%. 2019.
Yeah, there was two. There were two of them. Anyway.
Okay, I was there for ground report with Dr. Prayag.
Yeah, he's my senior. He's my lecturer, professor.
Okay, so are you going to release the tiger back? Because when I spoke to Balachandar, he told me that the tiger is from Nagarhole, which has traveled to Bandipur.
Let me give you a little, a bit of an outlook on this episode. So this tiger is from Antarsante. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so like I said, we send camera trap images to the IT cell where they match stripe patterns, and they already have a database of all the tigers in India. So the stripe patterns match that of a tiger that was first found in Antarsante. And it has found its way all the way to Bandipur through the forest wildlife corridors, possibly being pushed out by a more dominant male. But the surprising bit about this tiger, so this is where I feel the bit about ecotourism also comes in. So it was the offspring of a tigress called, very colloquially, it's called as I think the tank tigress or something. It's one of the offsprings. And it has gotten used to the presence of humans from a very young age. So we don't even know if it has, how successful it is at hunting in the wild, because it started lifting cattle from a very young age. And I think when we captured it, it was hardly 3.5 to 4 years old, which is just juvenile age, probably just hit maturity. Male tigers usually hit maturity by 5 to 6 years. This was around 4 to 5. So it's probably just hit maturity, and it's a very young age for them to be lifting cattle and things like that, and even to be preying on humans. So once that happened, we had no other choice. We did try capturing it physically, and now it's leading its life at a rehab center in Kurgali. What happens with the tiger is definitely not my call. So our job ends at capture and bringing the tiger to a decent conclusion. So the fate of the tiger depends in the hands of the bureaucracy, and there are many people above us who take this sort of decision. So what exactly happens to it is really not my call. I can't speak on that.
Okay, okay, so thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Good evening, sir.
Okay,
Hi, good
so
evening.
now we take any two volunteers for the question, and then we open it's the general discussion. So any two volunteers for Wasim sir. Continue your question.
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Sir, I had one question. Like the tiger that are living in zoo, do they
Right.
have same mental health status as compared to the one living in wild?
Definitely not. Definitely not. So
And
have you seen? You must have seen tigers pacing. I'm sorry. Is there an extra question to that?
yes, sir.
Yeah, please continue. I'm sorry, I cut you
And
short.
if this is so, like you told that tigers that are in zoo that are in captive, they help in conservation. So if they don't have the same mental health status, then how can they contribute the better genes in breeding programs?
I'll tell you how. So first of all, the mental state of not just tigers, any captive animal is severely deteriorated. You must have seen big cats pacing around the cages. They're just walking endlessly in circles. So this is something we call an obsessive compulsive disorder. They've for reasons best known to psychologists, they they're not used to, because they walk so much in the wild, and now they are confined to a very small space. They get into this rut of just pacing up and down, and that becomes a habit over time, which uh, becomes obsessive after a while. So but this has nothing to do with their genetic basis. How they aid in conservation is, say, for example, you have captive tigers in zoos, which are not many. A zoo will have probably 5 or 6 tigers. Sometimes, if it's a big zoo, they'll have about 10 or 12. But eventually, these tigers are going to get old and they're going to pass away. So, the zoos need tigers to have people walk in through their gates. If there are no big cats, a lot of people would not even visit zoos. That's a sad reality of our society. So what happens then is that if they run out of tigers, or if they have to have exchange programs for other animals and things like that, so there's a lot of pressure on the existing tigers in captivity to breed. So if they don't breed, the zoos run out of cubs, and and then that's a very bad cycle to get into. So if you have a tiger that is in rehab, that is not fit for release in the wild, and it is just going to spend its life there, and if it can contribute by way of breeding and maybe producing offsprings, so there's going to be a decent population of captive tigers. And the most important part is that that infuses new genes into the gene pool. Otherwise, you just have parents mating with the offspring and the offspring mating with the sibling, and there's a lot of inbreeding, there's a lot of genetic disparity. And these are not tigers that you can exhibit to the public, and it's definitely not a healthy population to have, whether in captivity or in the wild. So the only way they contribute is through the infusion of new genes. Again, it has nothing to do with their psychological state. They're obsessive, that's different, but that has not, at least scientifically, there's no bearing on their on that being on that psychological manifestation spreading through the genes to the offspring and things like that. Apart from that, we do get the opportunity to observe them. We can do a lot of clinical trials, we learn about new diseases, we learn about new things, we learn about their anatomy, and otherwise you can't do that in the wild. So this is the only way they contribute to conservation. Eventually, it all boils down to the zoo and its finances, and that being put into conservation. So this is all. There's nothing more to it.
Thank you, sir. Sir?
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
I would like to continue with the previous question. In Bannerghatta Zoological Park, I saw a Himalayan black bear.
Yeah.
So, keeping such an animal which does not belong to that particular habitat or
Yeah.
that particular environment, how does it support to the health of that animal and to the conservation as whole?
See, I started off by saying that in an ideal world, I would not want any zoos. No animal deserves to be kept in four walls or in confinement, but that is not the world we live in. Zoos are there, they're going to exist. People like you or me would not want to see a Himalayan black bear, but trust me, there are hundreds of people out there who do. And if a zoo has to sustain, they need people to come in so that the animals there are fed. They have enough finances to run the zoo, to support the livelihood of the people who work there for the animals and things like that. And the more variety a zoo has, the more footfall. It all boils down to business and finances. And I'm not associated with the zoo, so it's not my place to speak on it. But I think my general understanding is just it's about education for the public, and also it goes hand in hand. You're trying to give what the public wants to see. I think it's just that.
Okay, so now we wind up the question session
No,
for
ma'am.
Vasan sir. And
Can we
the
go with
questions
one
can
more
be
question?
continued later for general discussion. The questions will be continued for general discussion. Now I call upon Ryan for vote of thanks.
Yes, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Ryan.
Yes, thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rayan Demel, a member of the Natural Science Association in St. Joseph's College. I consider myself really, really privileged to be giving the vote of thanks for Dr. Wasim Misra on behalf of the Natural Science Association, Department of Zoology. I think it's quite clear now from Sir's address that he's a bona fide modern-day James Herriot, though his stories would make for a much more daring and adventurous experience. I'd like to thank you, sir, for that insightful talk. You gave us a lot of new information, especially seeing that the role of a wildlife veterinarian is something that not many of us know much about. You also showed us the more vulnerable side of the lives of tigers as well. We are very grateful to have had this experience with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. It's an honor.
Now I'd like to open up the discussion with the panel. Everybody who has questions can address it to the particular panel person that they want to ask. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question for Dr. Wasim.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah, Wasim, like the Bandipur incident, when we went, the villagers were not happy. They said, "You are coming from NGO and we don't want to allow you people." So, is there any way that wildlife people can educate these villagers about?
Ma'am, trust me, we face a lot of similar criticism, but because it's a job, we go ahead with it anyway. I think the best person for you to bowl this question to would be Ms. Bhavna, because I think she works a lot with the communities living around forests. I honestly don't have the expertise with community education. I think this question to her you would get a more apt answer than I would be able to give you.
Okay, sir. So, Bhavna, ma'am, can you give an
Yes.
answer for this?
Could you please tell me again? I'm so sorry. Could you repeat?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, when we had been to, there was an incident where a tiger killed a human. So
Right.
when we entered the village, there were people who were like saying, "No, you are from NGO, so we don't
Yeah.
want you people to enter here. Next time we see you, we are gonna kill you." So you don't, NGO people don't understand our
Yeah.
life. They only are worried about the animal, wild animals. So
Yeah.
try to protect us, then try to protect the animal was the answer they gave us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there any way that we can educate these people the importance of wildlife?
Actually,
Bhavna,
I won't.
excuse
Yeah.
me, Bhavna. Sorry for the interruption. The participants who are asking, please introduce yourself so that we'll get to know your background as well. Madam, whoever asks a question can tell about yourself, introduce yourself, and then proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm Sharmila, and I'm a volunteer with PFP as well as I have been doing incident for as a volunteer there, just to see the ground report working, so that we don't get an image like it happened with the Avni case. So that's about me.
Yeah, Sharmila, your question is very apt, but there was one word you used. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, I can
You
hear you.
used a word called how can we educate them, right? So firstly, I would really urge whoever's working with communities not to use the word educate them, because they have far more knowledge than we would ever have. One, because they have been living with the tigers in their backyard practically, right? And wild animals for that matter. Dr. Wasim told us such enlightening stories about the wild animals, and they live with all these animals, and we don't know what they go through when they lose a family member. It's easy for us to sit in the city and say, oh, but why? We are trying to just go and help them. Why are they not letting us come in? But there was this one particular incident, Sharmila, you won't believe it. There was an incident in the village where this tiger had mauled the grandfather. And we didn't want to do the program there. We thought they would get upset, but they said that because you've come and sat with us, you had a cup of tea with us, you understand our grief, you participated in our grief, because we sat the whole day, we were sitting with the family. We didn't have to say anything. And we said, we won't do the program, it's okay. The next day, he himself came, the son of the person who was deceased came and said, why don't you take my children to the park as well? I understand what has happened is unfortunate, but thank you for understanding our grief, and thank you for participating in that. So it's more about spending time with them, understanding the challenges, because I think we're still very superficial with that. That itself will definitely help build a bond with communities, and you can work with them better. Definitely.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Participants can also raise their hand. There is that icon there you can press if you want to ask your question to any of the panel members. I think all three are there. Avinash, Dr. Wasim, and Bhavna are with us.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please proceed. Introduce yourself and identify with which panelist your question has to be answered. You can proceed.
Yes, thank you. I'm Menon. I'm a student of veterinary. I'd like to talk to Dr. Wasim.
Hi, Menon.
So I know today's discussion is more about tigers, but I think when it comes to large cats, leopards face a lot of man-animal conflict too. So
Yeah,
what
definitely.
is the take of the government? Is it the same as we do on tigers itself, or?
I'm sorry, I missed that part. What is what?
Is it different the way we handle man-animal conflicts with leopards? Is it different from the way we manage the tigers, or is it the same protocol that they follow?
In principle, it's the same. The protocol has been laid out by the National Tiger Conservation Authority, so that there's no wavering from what has been set as a standard procedure. But like I said, every capture is different, every animal is different. The thing with leopards is that we usually encounter leopards in urban areas or in village limits. We don't generally capture leopards in buffer zones because they're more commonly found outside. We find them fallen in wells, we find them housed in poultry farms, poultry sheds. We see them in apartments and things like that. But with the tiger, it's mostly in the buffer zone. It's an animal that keeps coming in and going out. So it steps out, gets into trouble, and then it goes back into the buffer zone. So tiger captures are mostly in forest fringes. It's very rarely in urban areas. But leopards, it's almost always out in the city or in the village limits. And that has its own challenges. Like rescuing a leopard out of a well, you can. I think there are plenty of videos on YouTube. There's a recent one in the papers also. So sometimes people sit in cages and they're lowered inside. so they can dart and bring it up. Sometimes you have to dart all the way from up. When you find leopards in poultry sheds that have mangrove tiles, so we need to get on top of the roof, remove the tiles, and then dart them. Tigers are mostly found in thickets, in bushes. So situation-wise, it's very, very different. But in principle, it's the same. We do the same identification, but we don't go to the point of sending images to the IT cell with leopards. Leopards, it's very straightforward because we see them in the city. There's no question of another leopard interfering in the capture. So it's just that one. So we immediately go in. If it doesn't fall into a cage that is with or without bait, we go in for chemical immobilization, and then they're mostly reintroduced. Very seldom go to rehab centers like tigers do. And yeah, that I think is the only difference. But the principle is the same. Tiger captures are more elaborate.
Okay.
Any other questions from the participants?
Good evening, sir.
Hello.
Yeah. Proceed. Introduce and proceed.
My name is Shikhar Kaushik, and my question is to Bhavna, ma'am.
Yes, then.
Ma'am, like leopards that live in Javai, Rajasthan.
Right.
Sorry. What I have seen in documentation is that they have a very close bonding with the tribal communities living over there. But with the passage of time, like we are moving towards the modernization and the change in lifestyle of these tribes, do they affect the conservation of leopard?
In the Javai region you're talking about specifically?
There's a specific tribe called Rabite.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. So the way we are moving towards the modernization, like first the people living over there won't go out towards the cities for urban lifestyle living and for better livelihood. But now as they are moving from the area to those cities, so do they affect the conservation of leopards over there? Because they live in a very interconnected manner with those leopards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Shikhar, that's a great question. I work in Central India, so I'll be able to speak more freely probably about the tribal relationship with animals in the Central Indian belt. And you know, the landscape is very different. The Javai region is more like a private game reserve, whereas where I work, it's wilder. It's a tiger reserve. So the landscape definitely is different. But like you said, modernization thankfully hasn't affected conservation and people's relationship with nature. In fact, the tribes I work with who I spoke about, the Pardis and the Begas, they are still extremely, even though the Pardis are more modernized than the Begas are still extremely primitive. The relationship is the same. And all these tribals still worship nature as their god. The Gonds, there's a Gond community in Kanha who worships the banyan tree as the Bada Dev. They believe their god resides in the banyan tree. And the tiger is revered as Bagesur. So they believe that the tiger is the protector of the villages. So he's revered as Bagesur. So thankfully, modernization hasn't affected the bond between tribals and nature. Thank God for that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
Hello. Can I speak?
Yes, madam. Proceed. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
This is I am Dr. Aziz. I work as a psychologist and a junior scientist at the Epidemiology Research Unit of Mission Hospital, Mysore. Hello.
Okay, doctor. Okay, Dr. Aziz, we can hear you.
My question was to Bhavna.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, your presentation was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Because we work with the tribal communities near Bandipur and trying to understand their culture and child rearing practices of the Sholigas, a tribal unit here in Karnataka.
Right.
Since I was a little confused with your presentation.
Okay.
the presentation topic was on tiger conservation.
Yeah.
And you very beautifully presented how you have conserved the communities.
Yeah.
The tribals. That's really awesome. But eventually I felt that these activities of venturing into the forests have used the very image of conserving tigers. I want you to comment on that.
The last part, what did you say, ma'am? What has happened? The last part I didn't catch.
I felt, my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but my opinion on this was, these activities have bruised the very soul of conserving the tigers.
Okay.
So I wanted you to comment on that. You're speaking about more about conserving the communities.
Yeah.
Very good. Trying to bring about a change in their opinion towards the forests and the tiger.
Yeah.
Well done.
Right.
But how has it helped in saving the tiger from its forests? Because absence of communities is what will progress tiger population.
You feel that the absence of communities will help tiger conservation?
Yes, leave the tiger alone. Leave the tiger alone in the forest.
Great question, ma'am. Great question.
See, as we will not like an intruder into our house. The forest is the home for the tiger, not for us to go and visit them.
I'm so glad you asked me this question, ma'am. Can I like to answer this. I've been working with communities for the past 11 years. And I am a student of psychology as well. I did my, And, working with people, I've realized unless you have communities, unless you work with people who are living around the forest, and these are people who are not encroaching upon the forest, ma'am. They are basically living around the forest in villages. So this has been their home for generations and generations. And India has been the perfect model for coexistence, that despite the population, despite the increasing number of villages, we still coexist with so many different animals, whether it's snow leopards, whether it's tigers, bears, leopards, whatever have you. And this I personally believe has happened because of community members, because when you work there, and I would love for you to come down to Central India as well, when you come down and meet with the people, they still believe, like I was talking to Shikhar earlier, that the tiger is their brother. The forest is their maintenance, their sustenance. So they want to protect it. They have been protecting it for so long, and they're not encroaching upon it. And when you give them that acceptance that yes, you are the ones who are protecting the tiger, and you work alongside them, they actually have changed. They have changed. The whole mindset towards protection of forests has changed. Like I said, there hasn't been a single case of poaching after we started working with community members. There hasn't been a single case of forest fire. Why is that? Because they want to protect the forest. They just need a sort of helping hand to understand how. Rest is fine. They have been doing it for so long, so it's fine. They just need a little bit of guidance. And it's working very beautifully right now, ma'am. Actually, it's not really bruising. And we as urbanites believe that, a lot of people tell me this, that, villagers should not be allowed to go into the forest. But villagers still do everything in small measure. Even if they take something from the forest, they give back. They'll plant trees. They know how much to take. I sometimes believe it's us urbanites who don't know how much to take. Villagers still know their proportion, and they do it according to their daily needs, not because of their greed, is what I believe.
Very well said.
Also, to add to, yes, Dr. Assis.
Very well said, Bhavna. I think your presentation misguided me.
No problem.
It was more. It was more on how you made jewelry, how the tribals were rehabilitated, and how you have been working with your NGO. The thing about forest fires was very nice, very right. Through educating, and I am very sure I'm since my experience with these tribals in Karnataka, they are the protectors. They are the protectors of forest.
Absolutely. We can't work without.
They are not causing any danger there.
No, not at all.
Thank you,
thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, Bhavna, I think in that regard, this discussion is over everywhere because on one side, you have
Yeah.
people working with these communities,
Yeah.
and then you have also issues like this coming up. Actually,
Yeah.
maybe the development or the urban setup that is creeping in and encroaching, that is what is pushing them. This is just my view to share with you.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, the tribals are on their own and they need some help in
Yeah.
terms of education, healthcare
Yeah.
system, or employment, because they know sustainable conservation as
Absolutely.
such. So probably the confusions are coming in where we have to attend to them. At
Yeah.
the same time, also not blame them, but blame the other side where the encroachments are happening.
Absolutely.
Is that true? Something like that?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely, you're absolutely spot on with that statement, sir. In fact, you know what happens in a need to prove, to pinpoint why tiger conservation or why the tiger population has gone down, we are very hasty to blame villagers or people living around the forests. Unless we go down and see the villagers ourselves or the villagers or how they live, we should, it's a completely different. And I was like this too. I went with privilege. I lived in metro cities. I went and I went with the thought saying, hey, I'm going to save the tigers. These guys are killing tigers. But when I went there, I saw their way of living and I was completely mind blown. They are the most sustainable lot of people on earth. And actually, we are the problem species, the ones living in the city.
Aziz is working with the Soliga community. They are spread over Bandipur, also to BRLs and Malay Mahadeshwara Betta. That these are regions in southern Karnataka. That's
right.
thing Dr. Aziz is working.
But I'm so glad you brought this up.
Yeah, Avinash and myself also have some experience during his degree days. We have gone through, interacted with these communities. Very true of their sustainable practices. At the same time, they also require attention in terms of the healthcare and the education.
Absolutely,
that also needs to be taken care. True.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Avinash wants to share something in this regard, if he's here. I think Avinash. Yeah, Avinash is there. Avinash,
I'm there, but
yeah.
I think both of them have spoken. I mean, addressed that query very well. I still stick to my lone tiger of the Deccan.
That's okay. Any other questions, participants? You can ask. All three panelists are here: Avinash, Bhavna, and Dr. Wasim. Dr. Aziz, continue with your good work. Very good that you are involved into such activity.
Thank you very much.
Please come to Central India, everybody. We would
Yeah, sure.
work.
I think, yes, we should work. People who are working in these areas should connect. The networking should happen.
Yes.
To move. And both of you psychologists should read each other's mind. Work together.
Maybe that's the best way we could get across.
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, participants? If you can pose it to one of the panelists you want to.
Hello. This is Rayan here.
Yes, Rayan, go ahead.
This question is for Mr. Avinash. So I attended your other talks in college as well, where you spoke about your research on elephants. And I wanted to know, if you're getting into wildlife biology, is it more advisable to focus on like just one species, and do you focus on just one species, or do you study many different species together?
I mean, to be honest, in terms of publication value, I have publications from Drosophilas to elephants. I mean, that's bane of working for an organization where there's a lot of pressure on what you publish, because as scientists, if you don't publish, you tend to perish. I mean, that's something that someone had told me very long ago. But to be very honest, like the way I opened my talk, I said I've not done any earth-shaking work when it comes to other animals, especially tigers and any other species. But my focus has largely been on elephants. So I think, I mean, my advice would be to focus on a specific area, not necessarily species conservation. I mean, today in India we have, I mean, not today, but globally, I think there are certain species that have a charismatic value. It not necessarily means it's just that the animal is very good looking or enticing, or it's also that there are a lot of conservation funds that come for only these specific species. And to be honest, if I have to be talking from the soul, I would encourage people to look at other forms of fauna as well. I mean, not just fauna, but look at other taxonomic groups, both plants and animals, equally to understand a get a fair knowledge about how the ecosystem works and how it is important for human life, and then look at interdisciplinary approaches. I think today the biggest threat for survival is the concept of climate change. And if you look at climate change studies across the country, there's not much of research being done on various aspects of it. So I think to diversify and not get stuck to a certain area would be advisable. But again, I'm sure in the course of your approach in pursuing your wildlife studies or anything of that matter, I'm sure you will be able to capture some areas that you're probably good at, because not all of us, to be very honest, back in 2006-5, I mean, that's when I got into this field. I was also fascinated by the tiger. I mean, I'm sure Jay Shankar will be able to probably recite a lot of stories that we had going to different forests in the Western Ghats to see the tiger, but I didn't end up working with the tigers until 2015. So for me, elephants ended up being a opportunistic opportunity in some sense to try and do something about the problem, because I think what we need to focus on is look at the conservation value, because sometimes as researchers we do not look at the need for conservation. Sometimes we end up publishing so much which has absolutely no value for the species or for the concern that is being raised. So I think we need to have some level of conservation in most of the wildlife work that we do, especially when it comes to forests and wildlife. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
You did. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Any other queries from the participants? I think we'll go on till 6:15 or so. Depends on how you respond. Yeah. Anybody?
Hello.
Yes. Please introduce and proceed.
Hello. I am. My name is Karthik Gokhale. I'm a student from Uttarakhand. I wanted to ask to all the panelists, how has the conservation of the local communities or the animals, tiger, elephants, or any other animal in that instance, led to the conservation of the habitat as a whole? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we heard.
yeah. We got your question now.
I think the panelists, both Karthik and Shikhar, who asked earlier, are students from Uttarakhand. They're very active, attended conferences here as well.
It's very nice landscape. Wasim, do you want to speak?
I was waiting for Ms. Bhavna to take this over.
Okay.
Bhavna is like a star.
Okay. Great question again. So your question is that do communities help in protecting landscapes, right? Is that your question?
Habitats, I think.
Yes, I mean the conservation of animals or communities. Yeah. Both. How do they contribute in the conservation of the habitat as a whole?
Okay. First of all, we don't conserve communities because they don't need our conservation. They're very happy people. They're content and happy. And what we need to definitely conserve is habitats. And yeah, in my 11-year experience, working with communities has especially protected the Bandhavgarh landscape with regard to human-wildlife conflict. There was a lot of conflict, like I said, electrocution of tigers, snaring, killing of tigers, killing of human beings, sometimes by tigers during attacks, by revenge killing. That has been reduced significantly because we are working with them with regard to conservation outreach. Pardis, definitely, because after working with Pardis, the cases of poaching has gone down to 0 in the Panna landscape, and the number of tigers is now 52. Earlier in 2009, Panna was tigerless because there was no one working with the Pardi community. But after the forest department and NGOs have started working with them, the tigers have bounced back beautifully to 52. In Kanha as well, working with the kids in the buffer zone and with the Bega, there's been a significant change in habitat. There was a lot of degradation because the Begas were dependent on the forest for leaves and forest produce. But after alternative source of livelihoods have been introduced, there's been less degradation and the habitat has been protected. Yeah. So these three landscapes, it's really helped working with communities.
Wasim, do you want to say something?
No, I think I'll just be echoing the same thoughts. So I think it's all about spreading education and awareness, which eventually translates to conservation of not just tigers, but any other species that might be living in the midst of tribals. Without communication, without help from the government in terms of sustenance, they are going to start venturing into the forest no matter what. So it is important that at some point you entice them into working outside the forest and with the animals, maybe given the expertise that they have. And I think only then you will be able to slowly help them move out of the forest so that you can extend the forest cover for the animals and also make them less dependent on forest produce. Like Ms. Bhavna said, eventually it's all about working with them and educating them and creating awareness as to what their loss can spell for them and the rest of the world. I think that's about it.
Bhavna, is Dr. Wasim triggering the hornet's nest when it comes to, because people would then ask, why are you displacing people, translocating them from their own mother?
I think I don't know if I mean, because I think the question was something related to habitats, right? I mean, am I right? I mean, was that the question? Because you said how was saving the tiger, elephant, I mean, useful in protecting habitats or securing habitats? Was that the question? If I got it right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so these guys went on a community trip. It was about habitats.
That includes.
No, he said communities also.
Oh, did he?
Said, yeah.
Yes, sir. I included communities too.
Okay, I'm sorry, Bhavna, you're right. Okay, so I second the opinion of Wasim and Bhavna for the community part of your question. So I will not comment on that. But when it comes to habitats, I think it's very important to secure them first. I mean, all the parameters that we take in protecting species is primarily from habitats. I think if you look at a country like India, we roughly have just about 4% of protected area. So when you say a protected area of forest, a protected area is essentially what it means is that all these animals that are nestled in that 4% of land area, which is considered to be forest, is where you can get ultimate protection. So therefore, the role of habitat is very integral in any of your conservation practices, like rehabilitating land, like securing land, like creating corridors. So all this is very, very important because today we're looking at an explosion of certain populations, and this is because of the goodness of conservation. Right? Today we have about close to 30,000 elephants in this country, close to 2,000, 3,000 tigers. This is because of a conservation successes, and one must not discount that attribute. But now having 27,000, 37,000 elephants in less than 4% of forest cover is not practically viable. Then comes the next question of what is the carrying capacity of forests? How many tigers can you have? Now, today, managers, policy makers, well, even the political class are happy with the numbers because India, generally, we have this number happiness kind of a quotient. We like good numbers. But we also need to realize that because of these good numbers, there is this increasing challenge of human and wildlife conflict, especially with tiger and elephant and other animals. Like even if you go to parts of Rajasthan, when I used to work in Ranthambore way back, then we used to have this huge problem of nilgai and wild pig. Now, these animals have no space and they've so adapted to human use areas that they've completely left forest habitats and come into human occupied areas. Like what Wasim was telling about the case of the leopard. The leopard is no more a forest species, right? So the question comes back to what you rightly mentioned is habitat. So we need to build more habitats. Like recently in 2015 or 14, there was this massive connection of protected area networks that happened in the state of Karnataka. New sanctuaries and wildlife reserves being created in order to beef up the protection. So I think the way forward would be to add more habitat that comes under the protective area perimeter. And that's how you can secure the future of these animals. Because like I mentioned in my presentation, today, roughly 70% of India's wildlife is outside forests. They're living in secondary forests, human use areas, multiple use areas. Now, these areas, like Bhavna said, have equal righteousness by both people and wildlife, right? So instead of, I mean, when I go to villages and I work with communities, the biggest debate that comes is who came first, whether the wildlife came first or we came first, right? So that's the kind of jargon that we are stuck with as conservation practitioners to take decisions as to who needs to do what. So it's ultimately imperative that landscapes are secured, and also we need to look at pragmatic ways. So I'll just like to quote, and I'll end with this because otherwise I'll keep talking. The Karnataka High Court had constituted in the case of elephants, I'm saying, they constituted a task force in 2012. And the task force report mentioned a plausible way of securing both needs of people, which is communities, as well as wildlife. So they followed a zonation category where they divided land, any land, whether it was community land, forest land, protected area, into 3 zones. So they categorized it. I'm sure you can read that report where there's much more detail, but just to give you a fair understanding of how that zonation happened. So they categorized land based on conservation zones, coexistence zone, and removal zone. So when you say conservation zone, it means that that part of land is completely meant for wildlife, right? Where there's absolutely no intervention of human beings. So it completely remains inviolate for wildlife. And the coexist zones are like probably habitats like Bannerghatta, where people and wildlife live together. There's no way but where people and wildlife need to live together, whether they like it or not. So where you come up with mitigation strategies for conflict and aspects like this. And the last category was the removal zone. Like the areas where wildlife has no future population, like doomed population. Like I would give a classic example of elephants dispersing from Bannerghatta into Tumkur, where archivally there was no history of elephants operating in those areas. So those areas are categorized removal areas where these animals that are causing potential danger to people have to be removed. If you ask me, in my personal opinion, from the experience that I have, I think this is the best way to move forward for a country like India.
Yes, it was very insightful. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Anukriti, you want to ask something? You can.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask this question to all the panelists. What do you think are it's not related to tigers especially. I just wanted to ask a general question. What do you think are the career opportunities in wildlife conservation? Because as much as I have heard, the jobs are very scarce in this field. So I really wanted to know if you try out for this field, what are the career opportunities?
I believe Bhavna and Wasim can answer. Avinash is held for, he's going to be the resource person for the career prospect webinar we are going to shortly host.
This is literally.
We don't want to get him into trouble for speaking too much.
No, I think he's clearing up.
Yeah, I'll speak after Ms. Bhavna does.
Okay. So great question. Again, I've told, like, a lot of people ask me, how come, see, I'm not from a science background. Okay, I was a terrible student of science and maths. And I've done psychology and I've pursued my journalism after that, which was very unconventional for a wildlife field. So, but I was very passionate about wildlife. So this came as a college placement to me, where we went to villages and started meeting community members, and eventually I joined an NGO. But if you want to pursue wildlife as a career, first I would definitely recommend that you try out different things. See what you want to work with. Do you want to work as a veterinarian? Do you want to work with communities? Do you want to write about wildlife? Do you want to be a filmmaker? Just volunteer with different genres before you settle down on one. I don't think the opportunities are scarce. In fact, wildlife is in fashion these days, if I may say so. And a lot of people are getting into it. It's a cool thing to do. But it's actually not cool on field. It's quite tough, let me tell you very honestly.
Can I just interject for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
I'm actually about to do my master's in wildlife conservation. So I was really looking out.
Oh, Mr. Avinash.
Yeah, so I'm about to do it. This is the year I graduate. So this is why I posed this question.
I'm not the one to answer it then. I have no science background.
Mr. Jaishankar, I think you're in a fix here.
No, Anukriti is our student, and we have taught her, and I have taught wildlife conservation to her. So to that level, I've been an inspiration for her to take conservation. Now you guys can guide further.
I'll send this one out. She's already on her path to being a conservationist. I think Mr. Avinash is a better person to answer.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll lift the ban now. We'll lift the ban and allow Avinash to talk.
Yeah, thank you.
I think, see, I mean, all of us can answer it. I think, if honestly, from the bottom of my heart, given an opportunity, I'd like to do what Bhavna had suggested. I think that's one of the best suggestions that you can probably have as a career advice. I mean, honestly speaking. But I think you're slightly a little late now to ask that question. So if you've already done your master's, I think the most logical thing would be to finish it and then probably pursue higher education in science. Right, but you can also wear dual hats. Like, I mean, conservation is one profession or one field that you can do multiple things. Like, I wasn't good at anything. At least Bhavna was not good at specific things. All I could afford was a camera, and ended up photographing wildlife as much as I could, pay the safari fees and go into the forest. But there's one man called Dr. Jaishankar who's moderating this, was a guy who got me into science. And I'm very happy about the fact that, although I regret it sometimes, but I think science has got its own sense of abilities, because you end up drafting policies and, at least advising policymakers to take the right decision. But again, having said that, if you take up the science stream, you have your own set of challenges. Sometimes you end up working in spaces where you're not giving out any conservation value. You're just sitting and, being part of a community of scientists, just publishing and building more knowledge in the department, because wildlife is no different from any other scientific subject or scientific major like physics or chemistry or mathematics or anything like that. But if you really want to do science with impact, then the conservation element should come. And I think conservation should be interlinked as well. Like when Dr. Wasim spoke about his involvement in the tiger capture and rehabilitation, I mean, that's something that none of us can do. So I think all of us have different personalities, different abilities. You could be a good veterinarian, but might not be very good in wildlife, like what Dr. Wasim is. So having known him, worked with him personally, I kind of understand, where people come from. So if your interest is science, and if you've come so far until your master's, then my honest advice would be to pursue that. And of course, opportunities are there. I mean, we have the big conservation spinners like the Tata Institute in Bangalore, and then you have wildlife. You have a completely independent body called the Wildlife Institute of India. So they have multiple opportunities in terms of research and projects and things like that. If that interests you, that's something that you can pursue it. But that's not the end. You can always look at other avenues where your calling is, and use interdisciplinary approaches. Like as part of my organization, we do a lot of programs where we involve art, music, handicraft, soft skill. All of these things are woven into this larger fabric called conservation, and that's how I think you can go forward, at least in the space that we are in right now. Maybe when you get to where we are, I don't know if it's going to change into something else, because it's a very dynamic setup.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank
Avinash.
you,
Very
sir.
kind
Thank
of
you.
you.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like Wasim also to say something. I mean, I'm sure he'll have something to say.
I would have if she was in the course of stepping out, but she's, like you said, she's well into her
Always quit and come
Yeah,
back.
I'm almost about to.
Like I think somebody asked me a similar question earlier. So you can become a vet for those who are still venturing out, but then if you want to work with wildlife, I would advise a specialization in the field, because in your bachelor's you don't really touch upon the topic, and then the difficult part is to stay in the field. A lot of times wildlife turns out to be you realize it's not your calling because of the work, the nature of the work. So they start venturing out into small animal practice, and then they lose touch. I've been guilty of doing that myself, but eventually, once you know where your interest lies, you drift back, like how I have. And the important part is to stick with working with wildlife, no matter how, because sometimes it can seem extremely unrewarding compared to other professions and other practices you never heard of. If I can just speak out of, definitely. If I can speak out of line, you'll see a lot of photographers. They claim for credit for pictures that they take and things like that. And when you have been doing something in the field and you're not recognized, and you see these people, for one picture, everybody's after them, you start wondering if my work is rewarding enough or not, and should I even continue doing this? So thankfully, that's never happened to me, but I've had people tell me this. So the important thing is to stick with whatever you're doing, because wildlife can be rewarding and not sometimes. So, but since you're well into your masters, I think you've already got your path charted out for you. And like Avinash said, just explore your options and see how best you can go.
So in case you drift out at some point of time, how do you bounce back?
That's wisdom. You need spirituality, I think.
I think Dalai Lama should be on the next talk.
No, I think, see, wildlife, I mean, all said and done, we can advocate it as a profession. We can advocate it as a lucrative businesses in some way, because we're looking at wildlife. When I was in Africa recently, we were looking at wildlife being looked at as a business model, right? You have an MBA in wildlife now. I mean, that's how much it's evolved today. But I think, I mean, I'm sure all the three panelists here would agree with me. I think it's largely a passion-driven industry.
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah, so I've known
Completely.
Babana. We met in Gujarat at the CMS meeting. It's a very short interaction that I had with her. I could really make out that passion that flows in the way she speaks and talks. And I'm sure with Wasim as well, by having worked with him, the passion is there. So that's your basic requirement. So as long as I'm sure most of the senior scientists attending here will also agree to see so many students pursuing wildlife. So if you have the passion, I think it'll take you forward. And I'm sure the calling will automatically happen.
Exactly.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Somebody was raising hand, can proceed, asking the panel.
Hello.
Yes, proceed.
Good evening. So my name is Apoor, and my question is, what is the mindset of government when they take such drastic decisions such as EIA or clearing the whole RA forest or buying a land for coal mining? Why do they take such decisions?
I think it's because of people like us. We want all of that. I mean, I think your ministers, the political class, is the representation of society. So if society wants all of this, I think that's what they're doing. I mean, it's as logical as it sounds, because most of these interventions and this linear infrastructure project, the civic projects, all of that is largely because of the needs of people. So I think, and people who not people like who Bhavna works with. It's the elitist class. It's a developed metros. Like even in Banarghatta, sometimes when we see most of these quarry units, we wonder where these quarry supplies are going to. They all go to the city. You don't see a single RCC roof house in villages here. It all goes to the city. So I think it's the need of the people. Like even when you have these election campaigns, let's not even go to the advocacy levels, at the policy level, at the minister level. Let's even look at it your even simple ward level. When you have your local councillor who comes to talk to you about campaigning for votes, what do people like us ask? We ask them whether you're going to improve our roads, whether you're going to improve the street lights, whether you're going to tarmac the asphalting. We don't ask them what you actually do for the environment. Do we ask your councillor that what are you doing for the environment? How many trees are you going to plant? So we don't do that. So that is a cumulative effect of what happens later at the higher class, right? It starts from there. The mindset of the people remains at that for development, and it reaches up to a point where you have to cut roads, decimate forests, change policies. Because I think the best part of being an Indian and being in India about wildlife is we have some of the most stringent laws. For having studied legal policies in wildlife for 6 months as part of my master's course, I don't find any other law as strong and as comprehensive as the Indian laws when it comes to forest and wildlife protection, whether it can be the 1972 Wildlife Protection Act, 1963 Forest Conservation Act. All of these acts are very strong in conserving forests and wildlife. Now, today, these amendments and changes are being done because of the needs of people. People are insisting that they need more facilities, more development. So somewhere we need to balance development and the environment argument together. So if one side flips a little more, then you have all these implications, which ultimately will affect the forest and wildlife. I mean, this is what I think personally. I'm sure Bhavna and Vasi might.
No, I do agree, but if I can just extrapolate a little bit, I think it also depends on because India is such a diverse country and the demands of the people are so diverse. It depends from region to region. Like for example, if I can cite an example that's close to my house, you have the Bandipur Kerala border. And Kerala has been trying forever to get a main road, a highway built through the forest. And it comes up in almost every election campaign, both in Karnataka and Kerala. And in spite of the vehement requirement from the other side of the border, the Karnataka government hasn't really given in. And it maintains that it's always going to put its animals in the jungle first. And the people that live around the Gundlupet area also want the highway to be built. But that demand I don't think is going to be given into, at least not in the immediate future. So I think it depends from region to region. And like Mr. Avinash said, It's all industry driven and people driven.
Exactly. One more last question and we'll wind up today's webinar.
Good evening. Hello.
Hi, ma'am.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, Nandita, proceed.
Actually, I have a doubt regarding, segregation. I mean, I've heard people use this term called environmental extremism or conservation extremism, where they tend to get biased and they can spread false information regarding things. So I mean, sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming, right? So, and people can't look at things in a very from a very fair perspective. So how to segregate between what is fair and what's not?
Uh, I don't know. It's a very broad concept, and answering that is going to be like walking on glass pieces. What is extremist to you may not be extremist to me, and things like that. Uh, but I think it's always about striving to find a balance. If I may give you a diplomatic answer without offending anyone. Uh, I almost, like Dr. Jaishankar said, I almost stirred the hornet's nest by speaking about getting people to move out of forest and depending less on forest produce. So it's a very difficult question to answer. It's very broad. I would just say that both sides are working towards finding a balance. You have to allow. It is true that if you want your tigers to grow or remain, you have to increase the forest cover. There's no two way around that. But at the same time, what are you going to do with the people that have been living in those regions for so many, I don't know, eons, maybe not even years? So I don't have an answer beyond this. I would just stress on the word balance here.
Yeah, I would like to add to that as well. There's a really terrible thing that's going around now, that people are believing everything they see on social media, right? And a lot of youngsters are on social media, and I would urge all the students here and youngsters in general, don't go by online activism, online campaigning, unless you have complete information about it, because that can be very dangerous. Because most of the time, online, whatever you read is half baked. So if you want information about certain things that want to know more about, go on field and find out for yourself rather than just read it and absorb it as something. I think that causes extremism as well, is what I feel.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Done. I think with that note, we will come to end this webinar on perspectives on tiger conservation held on the International Tiger Day. I'm thankful to the management St. Joseph's for encouraging us to this. The final vote of thanks will be proposed by Rebecca. So from my part, I'm sharing my gratitude to all the speakers for today, right from Harish Narsimurthy, Bhavna is here, Dr. Vasing, and being here and sharing your thoughts and views. Thanks to Avinash. We have an MOU with A Rocha. They have been supportive in all the collaborations that we are having in the form of webinar. This pandemic has provided us this opportunity to convey knowledge about different topics, and we are doing in that regard. I'm also thankful to the HOD, Department of Zoology, Professor Thomas, and all the faculty members for their support in making this a smooth one. Thank you to all the participants as well, but the formality goes with Rebecca for the final vote of thanks. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Am I
Yeah,
audible?
proceed. Yes, Rebecca, proceed.
Yeah, yeah. The row is there. Good evening, all of you present here. My name is Rebecca Joanna, member of Natural Science Association and a student of St. Joseph's College. I'm here to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of Natural Science Association, St. Joseph's College, and A Rocha India. I express my gratitude to the Rector, Reverend Father Sweber D. Silva, S.J., and Principal Reverend Father Victor Lobo for their support and encouragement. The faculty, Department of Zoology for their support and encouragement. A big thanks to Dr. Jaishankar and the NSC office bearers who have worked day and night in making the national webinar a reality. Thank you, participants from different parts of the country. You made it happen. Thank you. Let the tigers echo reverberate the forest. Let us keep the tigers in jungle and not in history. Safe tigers, have a good day.
Thank you.
Anukriti, any final announcements to the participants regarding the feedback and certificate?
Yes, yes, sir.
Please make it
The
and then wind it up.
participants are requested to please fill the feedback form properly, and they will receive the certificates in a day or two.
I think it'll all reach them through their mail. That's how it is going to work. Thank you, participants. Be there for all the webinars that the department is planning at St. Joseph's. Thank you all. Good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar.
Thank you
Pleasure
so
to be here.
much.
Thank you.
It's an honor, in
Thank
fact.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
Avinash.
you. Thank you, doctor.
Thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you, Bhavana. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Bhavana. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. Bye.
Right.
Bye, Wasim. Bye,
Bye.
Bhavana.
Bye.
Bye, Avinash. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jay. God bless. Bye.
Okay. Soumya, we can end the session.